Texas Longhorn caramel for you guys. I love caramel chocolate. Pecans.
The inside door. What are you on restaurants? We don't
No
know.
turtles for them.
Could we get them? Lindy's got it. Thanks, Lindy.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is our Wednesday, July 24th regular Board of County Commissioners meeting. And we'll start with, Phil, is there any additions or deletions to today's agenda?
There are none.
Okay, thank you. Next is an opportunity for the public to make any public comments that are not on today's agenda. Anybody wishing to make any public comments today? Was that a hand in the back? No, okay. Just waiting. Okay. Seeing none, we'll close the public comment and bring it back to commissioner comments. Commissioner comments? Steve?
I would like to show the public and the commissioners barley leafy spurge that I harvested this morning on our ranch, and that's the whole crop. And I just want to urge everybody who owns property in Pitkin County to continue working on your noxious weeds, and many of them you can just harvest them and keep them from going to seed, and put it in something like this. I put it in a tight bag so I can dispose of it so the seeds don't go anywhere else. So there are a lot of things you can do with just a shovel and a plastic bag and harvesting the seeds to keep noxious weeds from spreading. And if you want to get more information, you could contact Melissa Sever at Public Works at 920-5390. Thank you.
Steve, can you pull one of those out so we can see what they look like?
Well, I like the seeds like. I don't want to waste all the seeds, but I'll toss the bag around.
I thought this was a greenback or something else. That's coming up on our agenda shortly.
And Steve, do you pull the roots on these, or you just keep the roots?
About 10, 15 feet deep. And so the flowers and the seed heads is all that's in there. Then I sprayed the plants.
And then you spray the plant to keep the original plant from growing back up.
Yeah, because the roots are so deep, it doesn't do any good to pull them. I mean, you won't get rid of them unless you spray them.
Okay, other commissioner comments? Rachel?
Yeah, thank you, George. A couple of things. One is I'd like to announce that the Club 20 Education and Research Foundation is going to be having some follow-up public forums on their healthcare discussions. And they received a grant and had been doing a lot of work across the Western Slope identifying what are the major healthcare issues. We have one up at the Health and Human Service Building, and it was very well attended and a lot of good participation. And they're now going to be having kind of a report back to folks, plus the dialogue to continuous solutions. And our regional meeting is going to be in Glenwood Springs on Tuesday, August 6th from 2 to 4 p.m. at the Glenwood Springs Community Center, that's also known as the Recreation Center, on surplus rooms A, B, and C. That's at 100 Wolfson Road. I myself will be out of town on this date that they have picked, taking an actual vacation and not business travel, but hopefully we can have others attend, and I'll announce this again at our Tuesday work session and open discussion. Additionally, I would like to say that I just got back last night from Fort Worth, Texas, where the National Association of Counties was meeting. I serve as the vice chair for Colorado Counties, Inc.'s Public Land Steering Committee, and as such, although Pitkin County contributes to that fund, the larger fund paid for my travel and registration to the event. It was the big annual meeting in which they elect their new second vice president. Once you're elected second vice president, you will move up to first VP and eventually become president of the organization. And I'm really proud to announce that Sally Clark, El Paso County Commissioner, has been elected to the second VP position of the National Association of Counties. And this was a real upset race. There were a number of fellows who thought they had it in the bag or thought that deals were made in previous years for exchanging of votes. And Sally plain out worked them, and she wrote letters to folks, she called folks, she had a great team there. We wore an awful lot of red, which is her color and her hair color, and it was a landslide. And the two other fellows eventually just withdrew from the race, and there was a little bit of sour grapes, a little bit of grumbling going along, but it is a race. That's what those things are about. It's a real distinction for Colorado and a real honor for Colorado. I don't think we've had a NACO president from that group before, and she is, as many know, a Republican and conservative from the Front Range, from El Paso County. But one of our big selling points was that at Colorado Counties, Inc., we work together in a bipartisan fashion. Sally's been one who's really pulled people together on the healthcare and human service issues, and I think she's just going to make a great spokesperson for all those national issues, testifying before Congress, working with the various federal agencies, and so on. So I was happy to participate and support her, and it was quite an upset, but it was really well earned on her behalf.
Good, thank you, Rachel.
You're welcome.
Any other comments? Okay, with that, I am going to convene as a Board of Health, and I think I need a motion to go into...
We have minutes before
I
that.
have minutes, thank you. Consent action items, first we'll do the minutes of work sessions of March 26th, June 18th, July 2nd, and the regular meeting of July 10th.
I'll make a motion for the approval of those minutes. Second.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Now I will call for motion to go into the Board of Health.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. And on this agenda is the Board of Health. It's a resolution appointing our local medical officer, Dr. Kimberly Levin, and Dan Sandine is here, as well as...
Just me.
Just
me and it.
Just Nan?
I was thinking it was consent agenda, so do you want me to do a brief reminder presentation?
Yeah, just for the public.
Okay, so the Public Health Act of 2008 requires counties to have a local medical officer when the public health director is not a physician. And as you all know, Liz Stark, our public health director, is a nurse, so that requires us to have a physician whose job it is to advise and inform the Board of Health and also advise and support the public health director. Dr. Cohen, who has filled this position for almost 7 years, did an outstanding job for us. He has chosen to retire from this position. And so the public health director and several other members, including me, participated in interviews, and we nominated and recommended Dr. Kimberly Levin, who has a master's in public health as well as an MD, and she's bilingual in Spanish. She is very active in the emergency rooms in local hospitals all the way down to Grand River, and she also volunteers her time at the homeless shelter to do regular clinics, and we thought she was a good candidate, so that's what we're putting forward. She does get a stipend, a small stipend. We have a choice from the Public Health Act whether it's a volunteer position or paid. We have chosen historically to make it a small stipend, and I will negotiate with Dr. Levin every year whether or not there's a cost of living adjustment or her salary needs to be adjusted on some level, and then it will be put in the budget.
Good, thank you. Any questions for Nan?
No questions, but I'd just like to comment that we did interview her as a board, and she seemed really to be a go-getter and just a perfect fit. So that's congratulations for her to applying.
Yeah, thank you.
I would accept the motion.
I move to approve the resolution of the Board of County Commissioners of Pickens County appointing Dr. Dr. Kimberly Levin as the local medical officer.
Second.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Nan.
Thank you.
I'll accept the motion to adjourn as the Board of Health.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Next, under consent action items is resolution appointing citizen board members. Charlotte's not here, but it's in our packet. These are, let's see, the two for the citizen grant review, and one moving up an alternate, Christine Smith, to the regular position on the Translator Advisory Board. And those two citizen board members will be Isabel Wolfer and Julia Barbowski. They're both high school students, and they're going to serve on the citizen grant review for the Health and Community Fund. We had a great interview with both of them.
I would make a motion to approve the applicants to the citizen boards. Isabel Wolfer for Citizen Grant Review Committee, Julia Habrowski for the Citizen Grant Review Committee, and Christine Smith moving from alternate to a regular position on the Translator Advisory Board.
Second.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay, we're on to our consent action items. These are first readings and set for a public hearing on August 14th. First is an ordinance for the Nicholas Family Trust Conservation Easement. Paul Holsinger is here to present this.
Thanks, George. So my name is Paul Holsinger. I'm the land officer for the Open Space and Trails Department. And just to set the stage of what this property is, it's a 312-acre parcel up off of the North Fork of the Frying Pan River. And I'll bring up a map here shortly just to show you where that is and some photos as well. It runs about along 2 miles of the North Fork of the Frying Pan River. You can see here what we're talking about. Thank you. Yep. So here's a little locator map of Pitkin County, and Aspen sits right here. This is 82. Basalt's right here. The road up to Rudai travels along the Frying Pan River here, and it continues, hooks into this road here, and then the North Fork Road shoots off somewhere around here, and property sits right here. This is what it looks like. It's, again, 312 acres. It encompasses 2 miles of the Frying Pan River, a reservoir, and 3 former gravel pits, which were actually used to build the road that continues up to the Holy Cross Wilderness and the trailhead for the Savage Lakes area. This property and project was brought to us through collaboration with ComDev. The folks were going through a conservation development plan to develop this property and also conserve the remaining parts of the property, so we thank ComDev for their help in this as well. The issue at hand here is we'd like the BOCC to accept a conservation easement on this property and then I guess give it to the Open Space and Trails Department to steward as part of their asset inventory. The easement allows for 2 activity envelopes, one here, one here. Each of these will have the ability to develop a 4,000 square foot residential home, 1,000 square foot caretaker dwelling unit, and 2,500 square feet of ag and accessory structures. And the remainder of the property will be conserved as wild area. Some of the things that we discussed during the designation ordinance to designate the property a CDPUD zoning were the issue with the activity envelopes, water rights, and the reservoir facilities, all of which were to include all of those features as part of the conservation easement itself. And I've worked with the attorney to come up with a plan and include the activity envelopes, the reservoir, and water rights that are pertinent to the conservation values. So we're able to accomplish those conservation goals with this project. Some other things that have come up since actually bringing this to the board, we discussed and have added some language within the CE to give us notice when any sort of work occurs on this reservoir, so that we can be prepared for questions and make sure the plans don't damage the conservation values. Another thing that happened since this has come forward is subdivision language has been beefed up by John Ely, which I can read that paragraph if you like as well. But I can answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Any questions for Paul? Rachel?
I think you just answered my question, but this has been fully reviewed by the county attorney?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Paul. So again, this is the first reading set for public hearing on August 14th.
Would you accept a motion to approve, George?
Yes.
I would move to approve an ordinance for the Nichols Family Trust Conservation Easement.
Second.
Further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, next, again, this will be a first reading set for public hearing on August 14th. And this is an ordinance authorizing the acquisition of the Glacier Ranch, an intergovernmental agreement providing for joint funding with Eagle County. And Dale will present.
Hi, George. Thank you. And quite happy to be here after a fairly lengthy negotiation with the Glacier family. Well, I've been in discussions with various members of that family for several years, and we finally were able to negotiate a contract as a result of a settlement between two different sides of that family about deciding to sell this property. It is presently listed for sale with Sotheby's, and it's listed at $6.75 million. It is important to the open space program, and this was recommended by the Open Space Board due to several features that it has. Number one, it's got 500 feet of frontage on the Roaring Fork River. Number two, it has about 100 acres of prime farmland. Three, it has a big share of the home supply ditch. Four, it is immediately adjacent to a property that we purchased in a partnership with Eagle County and Basalt and GOCO, now known as the Red Ridge Ranch Open Space. You put all this together and we would end up with an open space of 282 acres that reaches all the way from the middle of the Roaring Fork River up to about 8,000 feet on the crown, and would be an open space preserve really without parallel in the Mid-Valley, something more akin to some of the big projects we've been able to assemble up here. We have several contingencies in our contract. One is that the Eagle County Commissioners would approve this prior to your second reading and agree to split this purchase price with us, with an additional caveat that we will be seeking assistance from GOCO. They have a grant that's due in August. We think we're very well positioned to get a pretty good grant award given the amount GOCO has in this grant round, and also given the fact that GOCO participated in the purchase of Red Ridge Ranch open space to the tune of $600,000. And GOCO likes to see these projects build on one another and reach a landscape scale. This also meets some of their strategic plan initiatives they've got going, with access to rivers being a big one, conservation of water rights being another one, and the potential for educational programs being a third that GOCO is looking for. I am already in discussions with Rock Bottom Ranch, which sits down about here, about the way the Red Ridge Ranch open space synergizes with Rock Bottom Ranch, and they're quite excited that we have this under contract. Chris Lane and I spoke yesterday, and he asked me to express his support too at this meeting, but with increasing interest locally in protecting our local food resources, both farmland and the knowledge base that it takes to create food up in this valley. ACES is in a position of wanting to promote that, and frankly is interested in collaborating with us on the way this all is managed as a educational facility, as well as a farming resource that can yield food that we can all eat up here. We have additional contingencies in the contract. We've got an appraisal contingency. I've commissioned an appraisal, and that will be coming in accordance to our timelines in the contract. Beyond that is pretty standard real estate stuff. The title reports and surveys and so on are due to the county attorney's office around the 1st of August, and we'll have a couple weeks to look those things over. And assuming all of that is what we believe it to be, then this contract will go hard, but go into hibernation of a sorts, both due to the GOCO timing as well as some of the tax concerns of the sellers. Our closing is not proposed until January of 2014, but we're going to try to get as much of the due diligence and the fundraising issues sorted out at the beginning of this process. The contract has a fundraising contingency through August 16, and really that's in there to make sure that the IGA with Eagle County is supported by Eagle County as well. This is a property that's in Eagle County, and I'm sure that'll be a subject of some interest to all of you. The Open Space Board believes this is an appropriate expenditure from the Pitkin County Open Space Fund, because this landscape in Emma is really tied to Pitkin County and to the interests of our voters in several ways. The Crown, obviously, is a piece of public land that is primarily in Pitkin County, although this lower slope is in Eagle County. The Home Supply Ditch diverts from the Roaring Fork River in Pitkin County up above the upper Basalt Bypass Bridge and flows down and irrigates a lot of farmland in Pitkin County before reaching this point right here and crossing into Eagle County. But the long-range protection of that water and that ditch as a resource for this valley is really, it's hard to draw a county line through that one. And this swath of farmland, really encompassing this larger area, is one of the historically most productive food-yielding resources that we have in this valley. I am sure a lot of the food that was eaten in this valley at the time when we were more food self-reliant than we are today was coming out of Emma, as well as the farmlands around Carbondale, simply because of the climate. So I guess I look at this as part of a whole system of how our community can function up in this valley. I'm quite confident that the public interest for Pitkin County is served mightily by ensuring that this farmland doesn't yield itself to the type of high-density development that is going on just across the river with the continuing expansion of basalt and some of the annexations and development that have gone on the other side of the river. So I think I've pretty much covered everything here, and I'm happy to answer questions and highly recommend this acquisition to you.
Thanks, Bill. So, Bill, you said that along with the Red Ridge Ranch, this will be the largest conserved area in the Mid-Valley. When we did the Grange Ranch, what is the acreage on that about?
Grange is about 240 acres, and I guess I'm distinguishing between conservation easements too and publicly owned land. Grange is, although we picked up about 18 acres on the river that is publicly accessible, the rest of it is private land. Some of the advantages of owning the land outright is that we can really manage it based on our view of the public interest entirely, including public access as that's appropriate, or decisions about cropping and what goes on there. But the combination will be slightly larger than the Grange Ranch.
Yeah. And the Grange Ranch is in Pitkin County.
Primarily.
But when we did that conservation easement with the Grange, we also partnered with Eagle County and the town of Basalt.
True.
So they did partner in conserving land in Pitkin County.
True.
Okay, questions for Dan?
Just on that, the Grange Ranch, is that on this map, or is that?
It is not. It's, as you go up Highway 82 and you cross the river, Grange is sitting down about where the light switch is.
Right off that edge.
It's kind of across the highway from where the Emma town site is.
And what was the share from Eagle County and Pitkin and Basalt on that?
It was a four-way partnership with GOCO. The total cost was $5 million. Eagle put 1.25. Basalt put 750. GOCO put sort of an odd number. It was. We ended up at approximately 2.5. So with the other partners on Grange.
May I continue? You had mentioned funds from GOCO potentially being a part of this based on their cycle of fund giving, but it's not indicated at all in here how that reimbursement, I guess, would be allocated based on the fact that the numbers that we have pay for the full purchase in our packet between Eagle and Pitkin County.
Right. The concept is that the two counties would share equally in anything that we can obtain from GOCO.
Okay.
And frankly, I'm planning to ask for $1 million. So if everything goes as we hope it will, we'll each get a $500,000 reduction in our costs on this.
I would think, maybe I missed it here, but that should be in the ordinance. It basically just says that there's potential funding from GOCO, but it doesn't say how or where that funding would go. If Eagle County applies for the grant, does it go to them? If we apply for the grant, does it go to us? And how it gets divided up. I'm also curious as to why we're not taking the transaction costs and dividing that as well between Eagle County and us.
We will.
So they're expending the same amount in transaction costs as we are.
Correct. And that's exactly what we did on Salt and Stall. Bob, on page 2 of the actual memo, I do note in there that if we're successful, we'll share equally in the savings from the GOCO.
Okay, in the memo, but it's not in the ordinance.
We should add that for second reading.
The next question, again, kind of along the same lines, and I've asked this more recently on 2 other pieces of expenditures through open space and trails for you to look into, which is the Prince Creek Trail and the bike park out by the high school, to see whether Eagle County would participate in that, given the fact that I think largely their residents are going to be using that more than our residents. I'm a little worried about the policy setting of paying for half of a property in Eagle County is where I'm getting at with that. And then the last question is just being curious about what have been found as the best agricultural uses for these lands now. I mean, they're just for hay. There's no food production other than cattle, is there?
Okay, so
Let me just clarify one thing quickly for Rob. The Prince Creek Bike Trail is in Garfield County. It shares with Garfield County. And Garfield County actually did participate along with the town of Carbondale and GOCO and Pickens County for the first 6 miles of the Crystal Valley Bike Trail. So that was partnership with that town. Just to clarify that, it's not in Eagle County. Trail.
right, and we're exploring partnerships with the Eagle County Open Space across the board through this boundary line area. This is really the first appropriation question that's come up since we've started having that discussion. As far as the type of farming, currently, you're correct. What is growing down there is hay that to some extent is going to cattle, and some of that cattle is actually on the shelf at Whole Foods. So that has been the agricultural product in the last couple of decades. Historically, both the Red Ridge Ranch and the Glacier Ranch were used primarily for growing potatoes. And according to Roy Cerise, who still lives right here and grew up in this and has been part of that agricultural community down there his entire life, on 10 acres in 1955, they yielded 500,000 pounds of potatoes. They would bring the trains up the Rio Grande right-of-way and park them along these farms, and they would leave with boxcars full of potatoes. And that was part of the valley history until the potato market changed, and competitively the farmers up here just kind of gave up. But the potential for the soils and the water and the climate to yield other things is still there.
Other questions for Dale? Michael?
Dale, do you see the possibility, you talk about partners in here at Eagle County. Do you see a time when Eagle County would participate in a purchase in Pickens County?
Well, I really can't answer that question. If you look at the relationship between Eagle County Open Space and Pickens County Open Space, there's a couple of features that bear on that subject, and one of them is that we've been at this for a lot longer than they have. We're celebrating our 23rd year this year, and really they're just kind of getting going with what they're trying to do. And secondly, and this is a political sort of dynamic that I've been navigating in stitching these partnerships together, is that I'm constantly reminded that only 14% of Eagle County's population is in the Roaring Fork Valley. And they've got some big fish to fry along the Colorado River Valley and the Eagle Valley. And frankly, they've been doing yeoman's work at protecting river access on both those rivers, and to some extent we're all benefiting from that as well. You can go launch a raft in places on the Colorado River at State Bridge, for example. They just bought that. So they are focused on that, getting those funds from their fund, and their fund is smaller than ours. They yield about $4 million a year. We've got about $10 million a year coming in, and then about $6 million for open space purchases. But it takes some talk, and there were some over there who said, look, we did the Red Ridge Ranch, we think we're done. And through a lot of meetings, and with Toby Spunk's help, the open space director they have, we were successful in getting their open space board and getting their commissioners very interested in continuing this investment through this this area, but there are some dynamics there, and the partnership that we've proposed here is frankly, I believe politically the most optimal we're going to achieve, and if we don't act on this property now, it's going to become the property of a new owner that won't have any interest in the kind of conservation that I was describing a minute ago. So I think all the trends have been positive in our relationship with Eagle County. Certainly much more opportunity there than has been the case with the other county that we need to work with over on the Carbondale side. And as far as the limits of what they can do, I'd love to hear that explored in a joint meeting between you all and the Eagle County Board of County Commissioners.
Can I continue? And you talked about an appraisal contingency. What are the aspects of that?
It's standard real estate language in our contract that if the property does not appraise at least the purchase price by August 30th, then we have a off-ramp at no cost to us. We're released from any obligations under the contract. We have retained the same appraiser who did the Red Ridge Ranch open space, and that appraisal is significant on several levels. One, we want to know that we're getting a fair price on this. Number two, Eagle County conditions all of their funding on the same thing. And finally, GOCO as well. So we've retained Peterson Appraisal Group, as they have consistently been able to write appraisals that go through GOCO's peer review process and are accepted by GOCO's review appraisers. And we'll see where those numbers come in. Frankly, knowing that the Red Ridge Ranch property appraised higher than what we ultimately paid, and Glacier has some attributes that make it more interesting, at least from a market valuation point of view. It's got the river frontage and it's got twice as much irrigation water. Our price is $900,000 above what we paid for approximately the same acreage next door, but the quality of what we're buying is in the marketplace. We think the appraisal is not likely to be a problem, but that's up for Dave Peterson to decide, and he's well known around the state for this type of work.
Okay. One of the aspects of the Red Ridge Ranch purchase was that it offered access to the crown from what I think we would call the front side to the crown. This doesn't have that aspect of it. It's an adjunct essentially to the Red Ridge Ranch. So how do I tell my constituents why we should buy it? I mean, if it was in agricultural use, you get a lot of potatoes for. I mean, how long would we have to produce potatoes there to get $2.9 million? I mean, that's a hard math for me to work with.
Well, thanks, Michael. I appreciate the question. If this is a public property, it can yield those benefits forever. So you amortize that over generations and generations. So you can go out 7 generations, as some have suggested, looking at that return on the investment. And we do that with all of our open space purchases. Again, I believe this landscape of Emma is tied as tightly to the public well-being of the residents of Pitkin County as it more so than the residents of the Eagle Valley, I would suggest. What our public gains in this, they'll gain a new access to the Long Fork River. The whole rafting is another feature that crosses these county boundaries, and the general public that don't much pay attention when they cross a county boundary. They just want to be able to get off and on the river. We will own a greater share of the most important irrigation ditch in the Mid-Valley, and with all of the innovative policies that we've been exploring about protecting these waters as valley resources, for agriculture and for our rivers. That gives Pitkin County a much greater seat at the table. We own this property outright. So to some extent, it becomes part of Pitkin County. Pitkin County commissioners get to manage this area for all the public benefits that it can provide forever. So I guess if you really wanted to go down that line, it's an interesting weighing of where the public is benefiting. There might have been investments we've made in our county that could yield less public benefit than an investment like this that I think has so many positive features and is part of this landscape that we all inhabit together.
Will there be a management plan for this parcel in and of itself, or are we going to do a management plan for both parcels?
And that's something that Gary Tannenbaum will be weighing in on, but in my discussions with him, he'd like to combine the two. What we're doing at the moment is working on an interim plan for the Red Ridge Ranch open space. The interim plan sets the stage for the long-range management plan that's a much more sophisticated document along the lines of what you saw with the Sky Mountain Park and Smuggler Mountain and other properties. So we think that delaying the adoption of a long-range plan on Red Ridge Ranch open space and putting these back together, frankly, they were once all managed by the Glacier family. If you go back a couple generations, this landscape was managed by a single family, and being able to put those pieces back together and think of the system as integrated, the tailwater off this field right here is intercepted and used in this one over here, that sort of thing. My recommendation would be that we do look for an integrated management plan on the two properties together.
Thanks, Dale.
Rachel?
Yeah, thank you. I think these are all very important questions and really need to be weighed carefully as we go forward with any acquisition. And I also think it's important to keep context as we look at these sort of things. The Aspen City Council in the 90s moved way outside their boundaries to purchase and preserve the Cozy Point Ranch, which otherwise would have been subdivided into 7 homes. And at that time, our Open Space Board, Pitkin County, thought that it was not that significant and 7 homes wouldn't be that much of a problem, and they'd have to go through GMQS anyhow, and they had other fish to fry. But the city saw that as a gateway to Aspen Snowmass and incredibly important to preserve, and they shouldered the entire burden. There was no grants or GOCO or Snowmass Village contribution or anything else. And I think anyone going up and down the valley today would be very glad and proud that that happened. And I think that it's important to look at our growth management policies. And if you look at other communities across the West or wherever growth management policies have been put in place, one of the largest downsides, one of the biggest negatives that's always criticized is leapfrog development. That you have a tight program, and so therefore all the development goes into Broomfield or Longmont or other communities surrounding that beautiful open space of Boulder.
The entrance is over
That
there.
way, yeah. And so, you know, I recall it was somewhere in the past 3 years, we were getting lobbied by a lot of our citizens to weigh in with the Eagle County Commissioners about subdivisions that were potentially going to take place in this area and homes that would be developed. And we did weigh in, and we asked them not to approve those subdivisions and to respect that area's master plan and so on. You know, I think that sometimes you can't just put an urban growth boundary line around a city and hope that it will stay and hope that it will hold 10 or 20 years out. Sometimes the preservation of the land is the best way to assure that those urban growth boundaries exist. And we all hear that comment readily that you know, things are different when you enter Pitkin County, and they are. But I don't want to see that difference start smack up against a rural subdivision. And we don't know what the future holds. I don't think that this land were it not preserved and conserved, would be yielding potatoes or hay in the future. I think it would be yielding asphalt and single-family homes. And I think that that is the other value that we all have to weigh. The water rights are very significant, and as we, as a state, move forward with greater ag water efficiencies, there's a real chance to be a demonstration project of how we can do that effectively and still produce, as well as potentially putting some water back into Pickens County's water trust, which is what we established that for. So for me, I continue to look at our area as one valley and one region, and I think that there is a synergy of the property acquisitions we have made and the goodwill we have created and the protection this affords to, if we wanted to get parochial, the half of basalt that's in Pickens County in preserving their character, but of course it's all of basalt. And, we have made some very significant purchases in the Upper Valley, Josti in particular, which was, I think 12.3 out of our open space fund. And we've made significant purchases in Redstone in the Crystal River Valley, and some of those were conservation easements on lands that were in Garfield County. But I guess this really particularly comes home for me for two reasons. One was reading in the paper today where the Eagle County Commissioners just approved the new Walcott subdivision, mini unincorporated town, and I think it was 650 residences, massive amount of commercial square foot. And so, when you go down that I-70 stretch and you look over at the turnoff to Steamboat and the nice little rural ranch that was there, that's gone. And I think there's 135 acres of open space that will be preserved in trails and, interspersed among the housing and the commercial. But that's what you can look forward to when you don't, take some sort of ownership stake and expend some money. The second is just flying home yesterday evening from Texas and, seeing in a lot of areas where there's no division between towns at all, but coming right over the Lanedo area and then right over that basalt area and being able to see those lands from above. And there's a connectivity that's important. It's important to wildlife. It's important to our rural character and our heritage. And I think that, like many of our open space purchases, people will look back 10 or 20 years and say, wow, they got that pretty cheap, because the growth is not ending, the desire to move to Colorado is not ending, and leapfrog development is real. And so I think that this is, a key piece to the puzzle for keeping the Mid-Valley as we've always thought of the Mid-Valley.
Rachel? Steve?
As you know, I spoke out against the purchase of the Saltonstall property before I was elected. That decision was made by the previous board. In a sense, I feel the same way about this. If this was a standalone project, just this glacier property in Eagle County, I would be opposed to purchasing it, have the public purchase it. I stand in favor of having conservation easements put on land to keep it in private ownership so that the private person would continue to pay property taxes to the county. However, since this is adjoining the Saltonstall property, which is a done deal that it has already been purchased, I see this as advantageous because it's putting two big chunks of the Glacier Ranch back together into one contiguous parcel, and there's real benefits to that. There's also the possibility of eventually connecting it to land that has conservation easements on it within Pickens County, farther to the south from there, going up valley. I would, in the long run, I'm not really in favor of buying private land just to preserve it, and I would be in favor even of this glacier parcel and the Saltonstall parcel of selling them at some point in time, good conservation easements on them, getting the public trail easements or whatever public amenities in place, and then selling them to a private individual to manage and take care of them. I would favor doing that. In lieu of doing that, I would hope that this land could be leased out to a bona fide agricultural operation and kept in agricultural production. We all look at this land when you drive up 82, if you look across the valley, you see a big swath of agricultural land in the Emma area, and this is a big chunk of what you see, as well as other lands within Pitkin County, that some of which has conservation easements placed on them already. So I would hope in the long run that you would consider going towards actually selling the land back to a private individual. I would be in favor of purchasing it at this time because I know what the other buyer who is mainly interested in buying it at this time it wouldn't be pretty what happens there, and we can keep it looking at the condition it's in now. So I would favor it at this point in purchasing it.
For years, there's been talk about having a Soper's County. And we know the reality is that will never happen. But the idea is that those of us that live within the Roaring Fork Valley, we have shared and common values and goals. And whether we look at our watershed or our rural character, this purchase with Eagle County becomes part of what I feel is the vision or the striving from the residents to create a Soper's County, one that we can all benefit from and enjoy. And I have to really give credit to Dale because, as Dale said, there's only 14% of Eagle County's population is in the Roaring Fork Valley. And Eagle County is just a small little strip that runs right from the Emma intersection just down to Elgibel. And you can see what that strip has been developed into as part of Eagle County. Similar to, as Rachel mentioned, the portion of Eagle County along the I-70 corridor. I remember when I first came here, there was no town in Edwards, there was no town in Gibson, and now you've got a continued development from Gibson all the way to Vail. And when we look at the 82 corridor through Elgibel, you see a similar development. And so for us to be able to entice Eagle County to spend their open space dollars in our valley for the benefit not only of the Eagle County residents, but for all the residents in the valley, I think it's a real coup for Pitkin County. We all benefit. Otherwise, one could see down the road that when you look to the north of the Roaring Fork River, you see all that development, which is in Eagle County, and there's more development that has been approved in Eagle County along that corridor. That could certainly happen on the south side of the Roaring Fork River as well, to the detriment of all the residents. So I think we have to look at the bigger picture and thank Dale and thank Eagle County for recognizing the importance of spending their open space funds in our little valley versus utilizing all those dollars along the I-70 corridor where they have the majority of their population. So I'm going to support this as well. Rob?
Just a couple questions that Steve brought up. I'm assuming that the use for this, as you said, as becoming part of Pitkin County because we will be managing it to some extent. Obviously, that's fairly hypothetical. I mean, it's on a larger view. It's not really going to become part of Pitkin County. But I'm assuming there's going to be a revenue source for this land in terms of leasing it to farmers, the hay. I'm not that familiar with what that is, and none of that is mentioned in this in terms of how that's going to be shared. Are we the owner now, so we get the revenue source, and Eagle County gets, just has the conservation easement on it? So, and then connected to that is, if we were to entertain the idea that Steve brought up of putting a conservation easement of our own on it and selling it, how would that work? And who would have control over it based on the contracts that we have with Eagle County and their conservation easement?
Okay, well, the first one, as far as the future revenue, we're in a period of time when ranchers are able to lease land in this valley for no cost, and that has to do with the relative price of food and the services that they can provide. So we have other open space properties, and I'm aware of a lot of private transactions going on in the valley where the leases are essentially in-kind services. The lessee is providing land management, they're exercising the water rights. On the private side, the benefit is they're also maintaining that agricultural assessment. So for the foreseeable future, I don't see the leases as a revenue source. But again, I believe that's a peculiar moment that we have in history where, frankly, because of the fossil fuel use that's going on in our economy overall, the proportion of a family income that's going to buying food is lower now than it has been historically. I don't know that will always be the case, and if we weren't subsidized by fossil fuels, we'd be able to charge for our leases on these ag lands around here. So that's something that will come in the future. Boulder County Open Space, interestingly enough, makes about $1 million a year leasing farmland. They presently own about 15,000 acres of farmland, and because of the commodity value of the crops that you can grow in that climate down there, they are able to turn that into a revenue source. And my prediction is, if not in our generation, in a future generation, that we'll be in that position again, because people aren't always going to need to do a lot of the things they're doing now, but they're always going to need to eat. And on the question of how would we structure a potential resale,
how would the funds, if there was revenue from this, be allocated, given the fact that we're buying this with somebody else? I mean, we're the owner, but there's a conservation easement on it.
I think
and the control of this property, as you said.
Our current relationship with Eagle, we haven't broached the subject of potential revenue. I think it's entirely reasonable for us to expect that revenue offsets maintenance, and that goes on the owner's side, not on the conservation easement holder's side. And I would expect Eagle County to understand that. I can certainly put that into the IGA as we propose it to Eagle County, and again, I think it's reasonable and rational to look at it that way. It's not a subject we've discussed.
And you will also kind of address the cost of maintenance too, which is not really addressed in terms of who pays for that. Is that a owner's responsibility, or is that a 50-50 share with Eagle County?
No, that's an owner's responsibility, and that's essentially the decision we made on Red Ridge Ranch open space, where we have the flexibility to do, to kind of lead the prioritization of what goes on with the property as the owner of the property. The corollary to us having that flexibility is the ongoing maintenance costs. We're picking those up as part of our maintenance overall. Now, I don't see these properties as becoming a significant part of our annual maintenance budgets, because the agricultural elements to them, I think they can be self-funding over time through the leasing program that we have, and as that may develop in the future. For example, we've got community garden going on a piece of agricultural land, Grace Shehigh Park, and that's not costing Pitkin County anything. It's all funded by the people that are using the resource. So we like Eagle County's blessing on the management plans and their support, but one of the reasons this partnership is attractive to them is that their open space program currently has one employee, their director. They are seeking to avoid building a staff like we have with management and maintenance and all that going on. I don't know that they're going to be able to avoid that forever, but that's at least their paradigm at the moment, which is why for them to hold the development rights, extinguish those with the conservation easement, and rely on our crew to take care of things is the way that this has come together.
And then the last question was, how would we
Structure
a future sale, and what would the logistics of that mean?
Pitkin County's open space program is unique in the state in being governed by a home rule charter provision. And that charter provision has a requirement that, absent some exceptions I'll explain in a minute, if Pitkin County wants to dispose of property that was acquired with the open space fund, that has to be approved by both of the boards, but also by the voters in a general election. We've done it once, and that was to facilitate the Ryan exchange. We can add a clause, and there's one in this ordinance, that creates some wiggle room to later sell property, and I've only included the 9 acres on the river in that clause in the ordinance that's in front of you, and I did that as explained in the memo simply because there has been some discussion as this partnership has built up around this purchase about whether we could all reduce costs by selling off the river frontage. I'm not a proponent of that, but because it's been discussed and it's of interest to at least some of the members of some of the boards that are involved in this partnership, I put it in as an option that the Pitkin County could have. And essentially what that clause in the ordinance does is it gives us an out on what would otherwise be the charter restriction of having to have a vote on this. In 2006, we amended the charter to provide that if we reserve flexibility to resell in the ordinance authorizing the purchase, we can do that as long as the net value of what we retain permanently is at least equal to our net investment. So, in other words, we can't, if we sell something, we should be retaining an interest in the property, and our net investment should equal the value of what our permanent property interest is. We didn't reserve the ability to sell the Red Ridge Ranch open space without resort to the full requirements of the county charter, which again is both the boards, an appraisal and a public vote. So if that's the direction Pitkin County wanted to go, certainly there's a pathway to do it, and frankly with something of this magnitude I would be more comfortable if that was an issue that went back to the voters so that everyone would understand the trade-offs. With due regard to what Steve was saying about reliance on conservation easements, there's one thing that conservation easements don't do very well, and that's ensure that land stays in productive agriculture. It is oft-repeated maxim in the land trust world that you can't force someone to farm. And so we've got conservation easements in the county, and I believe in them as a tool, but one of the downsides of that mechanism is that if one of those private owners decides someday, look, I'm going to have horses on this property, I'm done raising cattle, there's nothing in a conservation easement typically that would say, no, we want you to grow food on the property. So we were trying to preserve these historic ranches, and by gosh, we want to see the livestock. We don't have that enforcement mechanism across these big conservation easements that we've done here. And that's part of what led the Open Space Board and my own thinking in this spot, because this farmland is the highest quality farmland in this valley. Although we would pursue an easement if this property wasn't for sale, and if we could do it with the Glacier family, we'd love to see them stay there. But because our only choice is really the purchase, and because I think having that management flexibility that goes beyond what we can achieve with a conservation easement, all those things come back around to, I think, creating a public interest in long-range ownership of this type of resource. It's not to say we wouldn't take a conservation easement if we could get one on this, but I don't see any pathway we could. So then in sum, if at some point in the future, Pitkin County decides, look, managing this agricultural resource over there really doesn't fit with what Pitkin County wants to be involved in, we have a mechanism to lean on the conservation easement, maybe reserve additional rights if we want to, and ask the voters if we can put this back in the private sector.
Can I just follow up on one thing there, George? You mentioned that we couldn't force someone to farm, and it seems to me like the free market of the cattle industry is going to determine whether or not this is ranched or not for cattle or for hay, in the sense that we're not making any money off of this lease. Are we potentially suggesting that if we want this as agricultural so bad that we would pay someone to farm it?
No,
As if we're getting zero for our lease right now, and the food market in this, the food production market in this valley goes the way it's gone over the last 50 years, getting harder and harder. Someone might just say, well, I can't hay that because I'm not making any money from it, so I'm just not going to do it unless you pay me to do it.
right. No, that's not what I was suggesting. I was suggesting we don't have a right to force farming where our property interest is simply a conservation easement. There is competition right now for these leases, for these agricultural lands, and with our ability to decide who the lessee will be, if we have one person says, well, I want to run my polo horses out there, and the other person says, no, I would like to grow hay to feed to local cattle, then the county has that choice it can make that it wouldn't have if this were simply a conservation easement. So I believe there will always be growers in the valley, and I think we're in a better position to get those people involved with our lands we own outright than we are with our conservation easements.
Michael, you had a hand up?
Yeah, but it was such a long time ago, I can't remember what I was going to ask.
Well, we have a lot of information.
Yeah, we have a lot of information. I guess it was related to Steve's question and the reconveyance of the property, and you answered that. So I would just say that I'm skeptical of this purchase, but I vote for it to see the results in the public hearing. But I think my feeling is, as a commissioner, I'm not here to rescue Eagle County or Garfield County from their choices. Their choices are the north side of the river. And their choices are 2-acre zoning. And they've had those choices, they've been able to make those choices. We got rid of 2-acre zoning 40 years ago. And nobody has decided to imitate that land use pattern in the valley. So I travel up and down the valley, I know it's Sun Valley. But I think what you see here, and I mean this couldn't be more graphically illustrated, is that the choices of those counties is for development. And I'm not sure that I could tell my constituents, now Pitkin County is okaying land exchanges and okaying purchases in other counties because we want to show you the best way to go. Those counties have decided that 2-acre zoning and heavy industrial and heavy residential development is what they want, period. I have not seen anything other than that happen. I mean, I'm glad that Eagle County, Dale got Eagle County to pony up for a conservation easement. But I'll wait to see when we come to another vote on this. But I'm deeply, deeply skeptical of purchasing properties outside of Picken County to rescue other counties.
George?
Rachel?
As I've said already, I do support this. I think it's a valuable acquisition, and I think it will maintain the quality of life and the character of the valley that we all come to enjoy. And I would just like to respond to a couple of things. One is that effectively, if the development rights were stripped off via a conservation easement and it retained its ag classification for tax purposes, I think the taxes of getting it back on the tax rolls would be minimal at best between the two. No development future and ag status. I'm not even sure it would be $500 a year divided among all the entities that we collect taxes for. Probably less based on some of the tax reports I've seen at Aspen Downs and other areas with that ag status. So I don't think it gets us that benefit. I do believe in a long-term or, medium term with renewal opportunities if the land is properly managed with growers and producers. I think that's really important. And I think that as we work with Eagle County, should there be revenues, part of it would be to plow back into the property for ag efficiencies, watering efficiencies, and things like that. And so that is something, certainly, as you brought up, Rob, that shouldn't be left to the 11th hour. We should have at least a working understanding of how we think that's going to occur. But it wasn't long ago we were talking as a board about potentially participating in purchase of some of those tree farm properties that the Forest Service was looking at selling, primarily to protect the river. And the protection of the river as a single watershed is important. And I think we were fairly successful in talking to the Forest Service about not selling the riverfront areas. But as we have gone through different exercises with our own 100-foot setback from the river and the aquatic needs of the river, I think that that's important. And then just finally, I'd say, there's always an equal and opposite reaction for every action. And their choices affect us. Their choices down there affect us. And they will affect us on transportation, they'll affect us on scenic quality, they affect us any number of ways. And so we affect them. We affect them with our growth management policies and the tight growth management policies we've had. It'd be hard to say that we haven't affected property values in the El Jebel area, or we haven't affected growth and development in Carbondale. It occurs. And so to me, this is one of the best ways to prevent leapfrog development and to mitigate from our own growth restrictions and maintain our character.
Last comments here, Rob?
No, this is just kind of my summing comments. I'm in favor of moving this forward on first reading. I will say I agree with Michael. I'm very skeptical about a couple of issues, particularly spending money in Eagle County at an even 50-50 match. And I do respect the fact that Eagle County is a young program, and they are moving in the right direction of conserving lands in a way that is more aligned with the values of Picken County, and I do agree with what Rachel said about the fact that these are lands that have effects on our citizens and our wildlife and our water rights and all of those things. My preference would be to get Eagle County to participate more in this. And again, like Michael said, moving this to second reading to really hear what the public comment is, to get more information. Going back to a couple of my earlier comments on some things that I would like added, if the board so desires, to this ordinance. One is that it be stated in the ordinance, not just the memo, that the GOCO grant gets split evenly between the participating parties. And I would also like it worded in the memo, because I think it's unclear to me in the memo, that the closing costs, the estimated transaction costs, gets split evenly between the parties too, that we're not allocating 25%, I'd say up to 25% being half of the closing costs.
You mean 25,000?
Meaning that they're matching us dollar for dollar on the transition cost of this. Therefore, we're not putting in a dime more than Eagle County, at least at this point, and that's at least a start going in the right direction for them contributing as much, if not more, as my policy of how we should move forward.
Bill, in your projected budget, you've got estimated transaction costs split evenly right here. To address Rob's concern.
That's certainly been the concept that's
On page 5 in our memo, so it's split evenly, just as the property acquisition is split evenly. So that's part of the budget. So I would agree that, just to clarify, that the GOCO grants are split evenly. That's probably going to be as much of a benefit for Eagle County to have that in the ordinance as us, so I would agree to that. But I think the budget speaks for itself.
But the first line of the ordinance and the therefores, it says that we allocate up to $25,000. So if the transition cost is $25,000 and Eagle County doesn't want to put anything in, we've allocated this in this ordinance.
Where was that, Rob? I'm sorry.
It's the number 1 under the now therefore let it be ordered.
Okay, so just...
And I'm just putting a clarification that we're splitting the cost.
Okay, that's fine.
You know, if it was phrased up to, and 1/2 of the transaction cost up to $25,000 would be
Yeah.
good language for second reading, and get your point in there.
I like that.
Steve?
There's something I just noticed that I'd like to have clarified on page 5, item 3 of the resolution. It says that Picken County will acquire a fee simple interest while Eagle County will acquire a conservation easement. What does that mean legally, that we would own the land in its entirety, and then Eagle County would have the conservation easement on it,
correct.
but not own any of the land?
Correct. That was a template we followed to do the Red Ridge Ranch open space. So
if there were income from the property, it should all be going to the owner of the land, which would be Picken County, wouldn't that be right? Or, as Rachel said, it probably would be going back into maintaining the land somehow.
I think that's very reasonable. I'm happy to put that in. It probably should go into the IGA with Eagle County, their acknowledgement that should this thing produce revenue from the uses that are otherwise allowed by the conservation easement that they'll hold, that like any other landowner, that revenue would come back into our open space budget.
Along with that, do we have to specify water rights as well? Because those water rights then are to the benefit of Picken County, and as we discussed earlier, if we want to have the opportunity to put it into a trust, we have the ability to do that.
Where John Ely has really pinned that down is in the conservation easement language. Colorado has kind of a unique statute that provides that you can restrict water with a conservation easement, and that's been our practice. It's also Eagle County's practice. So the conservation easement that Eagle County holds on Red Ridge Ranch open space provides that we cannot sell the water to the Front Range or something, and that the only use that we can put it to other than on the property would be through some kind of a stream flow program. And so in that sense, the holder of the conservation easement has a type of a property interest in the water, but the owner of the land then has some choices within what the conservation easement allows. And again, it would be, use it on the property for agriculture or work through the mechanisms that you all are familiar with that that the county attorney's office has developed for stream flow protection. I'm happy to add that explicitly in the ordinance itself, but that is our practice with these conservation easements.
I'm looking at Chris, our attorney.
I mean, a conservation easement is an interest in land. When you have a parcel of land, the property interest is divisible. So just as you could have a 50-50 ownership interest with your wife or your mother or your father, you can also parcel out particular interests in the land, in this case the development rights, which are given to someone else and they hold them through this conservation easement. And the water rights are pertinent to the property, and as Dale has described, he and John have been working to develop systems whereby the water rights can similarly be encumbered by virtue of limitations in the conservation easement, but the property owner is the owner of the water rights.
Great, thank you. I'll just say two other things in terms of the water rights, and what this provides us is not only those irrigated water rights, but access to the Roaring Fork River. And we know that as more and more properties are being bought up and privatized, access to our gold medal waters are being restricted, just as they are in terms of access to our public lands. And this is another opportunity for us to protect public access to the Roaring Fork River for those who wish to raft, fish, to bird watch, that they may not otherwise would have had the opportunity to do. So for me, that is as important as the ag portion of this property.
Would you accept the motion?
Please.
I would move to approve the ordinance authorizing the acquisition of a Glacier Ranch and intergovernmental agreement providing for joint funding with Eagle County as amended with the suggestions that Rob has made and discussed here at the table.
Second.
Any further discussion? Rachel, then Michael?
Well, I would just like to say, thank you to the residents of Eagle County who have had the foresight to pass an open space funding mechanism. And I think we have seen, sadly, open space funding mechanisms fail repeatedly in Garfield County. And there's a great many citizens there, particularly in the Roaring Fork Valley, who are supportive of such measures, but it really hasn't passed. And so I think that this is a new step in what has been a developing and rich partnership. And while I fully agree that a good contract keeps the peace between partners and defines obligations and expectations, and it's necessary to go through all the elements so that we have secured those and we maintain that good partnership, this is a very valuable acquisition and a valuable partnership.
Michael?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how the homestake ditch is governed, and so I don't know what our freedom is to deal with that water. And that's something we're going to have to find out, because I'm not sure that we can do anything with the trust, because it's really the governance of the ditch that decides what happens there. And in terms of access to the river, well, if we own the property underneath the river, we can have access to it. The other parts of the river are owned by other people, and they have to grant access to the river. So let's not confuse access to the river as access to any other place other than the land we own on the river. So I just want to make that clear.
No, I understand that. I appreciate that. And that provides access that we not have and we do not have currently because it's privately owned. Okay, so we have a motion, we have a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you, Dale. Why don't we take a 10-minute break? That will give an opportunity for our next presenter to set up if we need to and for us to clear our heads.
Great. Very good.
LLC Development Agreement, Site Plan Review for Driveway, Extension of Vested Rights, an amendment to development permit. Suzanne Wolf is going to present.
I'm going to use Glenn's graphics that he brought to walk you through this. So, in general, the proposal here, well here, I'll start with the maps. And here's Owl Creek Road. Aspen would be over here. Snow Ice Village over this way. So this is where, there's the red barn on Owl Creek Road. That's probably your best landmark. And this is where you kind of curve and then head onto the flats there. This driveway is existing. This is the driveway I referred to as the driveway to the Goober family lot split lots. These are two lots up here. This is lot 1, and then lot 2 is also in this area. Both of these lots are developed, and this driveway was improved to provide access to those. That goes back to the early 90s. So this is an existing driveway. This Lot 1 Mandalay North subdivision, or what's referred to as the Outlook parcel, is the parcel we're primarily discussing today. This is the building envelope that was previously approved on this parcel. And the red line here is showing you the driveway that was approved in 1993 by the Board of County Commissioners to provide access to this envelope. And that approval that was granted in 1993 also provided a 20-year vested right. And I'll go more into the background on all of these. So this is the Outlook parcel that we're discussing. There's also mention of, here's Lot 2 of the Owl Creek Meadows subdivision, which really is only implicated in terms of improvements to this driveway that we'll be discussing. And then this is a 35-plus acre parcel. There are other 35-acre parcels that have been created out in the remainder of this property, none of which have development rights. But that's where, when this is called Owl Creek Meadows subdivision, this isn't a county-approved subdivision. It's a creation of 35-acre parcels via the state exemption. So that's one of a number of 35-acre parcels that have been created out in this area. So that gives you kind of the general, and then I'll walk through. I'll give you the summary of what the request is, and then I'll do the background on each of those prior approvals to give you a little more information there. So the applicant is proposing to develop a single-family residence, barn, garage, office, and other agricultural buildings within the building envelope approved by the Board of County Commissioners in 1993. So this is the envelope that was approved, and here we're talking about the Outlook parcel. The applicant is proposing to eliminate the approved access to the Outlook parcel, so the red driveway here that has not been developed, and to utilize the existing driveway, the blue line, the blue driveway here, to provide access to the parcel. This requires the following approvals. There's activity envelope and site plan review to improve the existing driveway to the Goober Family Trust lots. So again, the blue driveway here. I'm going to give you yours back. I'm going to try mine. This is kind of cutting in and out on me. And to construct a driveway off from this blue driveway, existing driveway, into the Outlook parcel, which is right here. So a portion of that, as you can see, is on the Lot 1 Goober Family Trust lot split, and then the remainder of it gets onto the Outlook parcel. So they're asking for site plan review approval for that driveway. They're asking to amend the plan resolution to eliminate the approved access road and utilize the existing driveway, requesting a 2-year extension of the vested rights for the Outlook parcel to construct the single-family residence and outbuildings as shown on the plan, and we'll pull that up in a minute. Those vested rights, the current vested rights expire on December 28th of this year, 2013. And we're requesting approval of a development agreement that was required to memorialize that original 20-year vested right. So there was a condition requiring it. The development agreement was never presented to the county for recordation. So that's an outstanding commitment related to the original 20-year vested right. If the additional, these approvals and an additional 2-year extension is approved, that would be incorporated into the development agreement for the property. So those are the approvals that are requested, and I'll walk through again some of the background on these various lots that we're discussing. So the first would be the Outlook parcel, Lot 1 of Mandalay North subdivision. As I said, in 1993, the board approved this driveway in this envelope. The original request when they first came in was actually an access that came all the way from over by Sinclair Divide, and then came across, I don't know the exact alignment, I don't think I can point that out, but out of that was not approved. The road that was approved comes across here right where there's an intersection with this access into Owl Creek Ranch. And then this new driveway would come across the meadow and climb up, obviously heavily forested here, steep area to get up to this envelope. The building envelope was established. The residential square footage on the property was specified at 15,000 square feet of floor area. What was not specified but was allowed at the time was unlimited amount of agricultural square footage. So the 15,000 square feet was residential. There could have additionally been agricultural buildings built on the property under that 20-year vested right. And I said when the vested right expires. So this parcel was created from a larger fathering parcel, the bigger property out here, and utilized the fathering parcel development right that was associated with the property. So the remaining 530 acres was left without a development right. So originally that was all in one intact piece, the 530 acres. That has since been divided into the 35-acre parcels. But as I said, none of those have development rights currently. So that portion of the property does not have development rights and is not really implicated necessarily as part of this approval at this time. And nothing has been developed up until this time on the Outlook parcel. No buildings exist. The driveway was not built. The Goober Family Trust lot split, so these lots, as I mentioned, the lot split was approved by the county back in 1993. Each of those lots has a primary residence and a caretaker dwelling unit, and they're accessed by this existing driveway from Owl Creek Road. So that's background on the properties that we're dealing with. And then I'll just walk through my memo and the various pieces that we're discussing. The first being the Outlook parcel building envelope. The envelope is not proposed to be changed as part of this application. Since the approval is still vested until December, the applicant technically is not subject to site plan review under the current code. Vesting would protect them from that. The applicant has submitted a conceptual plan, which, since it was originally submitted, has been even further refined. So the most recent, when you got your packet, there were maps dated July 17th. That's the most current site plan. And essentially, they are providing a site plan that we would be looking at under the current code. It's not required, but they've been refining their concept and are willing to include that as part of this application to specify actually where buildings are going within that building envelope and what type of development is going to occur. The actual siting of the buildings and the approximate size of all of the buildings has been proposed. So that's the plan. Actually, maybe it would help if we put that one up and we can work through that. So for this application, the applicant is proposed to limit the total floor area of residential and agricultural buildings to no more than 15,000 square feet. So they're letting go of the ability under the original approval to have agricultural buildings above and beyond the 15,000 square feet. They're counting all of their buildings towards a total of 15,000 square feet. I've got the square footages and they're shown up here. I won't walk through all of that, but as you can see, here's the driveway coming in off of that, I'll call the Goober driveway. There's an existing kind of two-track here. The driveway will actually cut across here to come in. I'll talk more about the driveway when we get to that. And this is the layout of the buildings on the property. When you're getting to this envelope, they've shown it up here, there's a point up here they've called Outlook Point. They propose to keep all of their buildings down in this area. This line shows you kind of the line of the vegetation. This whole portion in the center here is all previously disturbed. It's been cleared out. There are no trees in that area. It's all open. So, but they have kept all of the buildings down in the southern portion of this envelope, and are not proposing to do anything up in this area. If you get up on this point, you would get a beautiful view if you knocked a few trees down. It would be very visible from Owl Creek Road and points beyond. So where they have placed all of these buildings, in my memo I said they would not be visible from Owl Creek Road and Glenson. They just might be a little bit. I mean, the site poles, you're not seeing the site poles, but a site pole is different, obviously, than a building. So it's definitely not breaking a ridgeline or anything like that. When the leaves are off all of the trees, might you catch a glimpse if you looked really hard to find something in there? Maybe yes, but very, very limited, if at all. So again, I've shown the location of all of these buildings and the square footages that would be associated with those, and again, the total of that would be 15,000 square feet. The entire property, the entire parcel, outlet parcel, is within an elk production area as mapped by the Division of Wildlife. I didn't note it in my memo, but well, maybe we could bring that up now. The map from Jonathan BOCC has done a lot of work up here, and he's obviously here today and can answer specific questions from you and provide more information on this. But from his field verification of actual elk production on the outlook parcel, that's what's shown here, mapped in the orange. So the envelope he's showing as, in terms of actual habitat, that this is not providing elk production habitat, given the disturbance that exists on the property. Again, he can provide more information on that. But as you can see, basically the rest of the property and a good portion of that, the previously approved driveway, were within the elk production. When this went through the reviews in 1993, it was not supported by staff and the Planning Commission. The board did approve it and basically found that there was not elk production in this area for the designated building envelope or the access road. The Division of Wildlife did not support that and had recommended that this existing driveway be used to provide access, but that's not what was eventually approved. The envelope was considered the best location on the property for development, given the proximity to the existing road and other development, and again, that has not changed. I think that's it in terms of the envelope. Do you want me just to keep going through the various pieces, George, or would you want me to
moving along
give a
and
break?
ask questions afterwards?
Okay, keep going. Okay. So then the next issue I discussed is the Goober Family Trust driveway. So that's this existing driveway. The applicant is proposing some improvements to this driveway. They've gone out with the fire department, and basically the fire department said, this existing road, as it provides access to existing residences, is really not adequate for us. There are places where, if not in absolutely perfect conditions, they would not be able to get up the road. So the applicant has worked extensively with the fire department to try and find ways to improve that driveway, not realign it, not try and necessarily bring it up to standards that everybody's sort of recognized that we're not trying to get it up to standard, but we're trying to improve it as much as possible so a fire truck can get up. It was really the basis of the exercise here. There is a code provision that affects slopes in excess of 30% on some of these. The curves in here is really where the primary improvements are going to be located, and it allows the fire truck to make it around all of those curves. That impacts slopes in excess of 30%, some of which were, from the original driveway cut, some of which may not be. But there is a provision in the code that allows for improvements on slopes of greater than 30%. It's called an exception for existing roads and driveways, and it basically provides for emergency improvements. It's actually an exception we haven't used very often in the code, maybe just once. It has a very limited scope. And just quickly kind of going through those criteria, Essentially, it's required to be a legally created driveway, which this is. It's required to already serve existing development, which it does. And then essentially, it's traversing previously disturbed slopes in excess of 30%. And the only purpose here to the getting into the 30% slopes is to improve it, to make it as safe as possible. So essentially, that's a very quick version of these criteria in the code that are required to be met in order to be eligible for that exception. And we've found that it meets those criteria to bring basically the minimum improvements necessary to make it safe for users of it as well as the emergency personnel. The other issue with regard to the driveway, Jonathan Lowski has addressed that extensively in the application. He evaluated the approved access and the existing access. So existing access, approved access. And the very short summary of his comments is that the approved alignment will result in the direct and indirect loss of mule deer and elk summer range, elk production habitat, elk migration staging areas, black bear fowl concentration area, and is within close proximity to an active migration corridor. The proposed alignment, using the existing driveway, entirely coincides with existing roads and will not result in any direct or indirect loss of habitat for sensitive species. So from a wildlife perspective, obviously this is a big win as compared to bringing this road through the elk production area that's all located in here. Obviously, other things are, it's an improvement in many ways, scenically from Elk Creek Road in terms of having a whole other driveway cut here, and extensive cuts to get this up that steeper slope, cutting across this meadow, and cutting through that existing very heavily forested area. So anyway, in terms of, I think everyone is in agreement that using the existing driveway is a much better alternative to the driveway that was approved in 1993. The other piece, again, it's just a small piece here, is a new driveway coming off of the existing road into here. There are some slopes of greater than 30% that are impacted there. In that case, this new driveway segment meets the code exception for short driveway encroachments. There's less than 100 linear feet of the slopes of greater than 30% that are impacted. And just one point here, doesn't show as much here, about the way the driveway comes in. What was that one that shows that, Glenn? This existing two-track is up in this area. You're on a fairly steep section of driveway here. They originally thought they would use this, but when they went out with the fire department, they said, we'd really rather have this not be, they usually want a 90-degree angle. In this case, they don't. They'd rather have it be on this kind of an angle so they can get a run at it to get onto this driveway because of the steepness here. If they had to stop here and make a turn, the steepness of the driveway in that section is such that in bad conditions the fire engine could not have traction in that area. So they much preferred this as a way to cut off onto this new section of driveway. The other requests, there's a minor amendment requested to a condition of the prior approval that related to use of the existing driveway and then about the sale of the property and when the new driveway might be constructed. Essentially, in this case, since they're eliminating the approved driveway and not proposing to construct a new access, there's that condition would be eliminated. So that's the amendment to the prior approval. Then they requested the 2-year extension of the current vested rights, and in terms of our analysis of that under the code, generally the question is, what is the benefit to the county from this, extending these vested rights? In their case, they have been working on all of their plans for this. Obviously, they've been continuing to refine that site plan and starting to work, I think, on architecturals, but they would like to have a little bit more time to do that rather than trying to rush to get everything in by the 28th of December of this year. So that's why they have requested a 2-year extension. And in this case, I think we've looked at it as the benefits are considerable to the county. We've benefited for 20 years by them not constructing the driveway that nobody seems to think is a good idea, and they're eliminating that access and will use an existing road. So that's clearly a benefit to the community. In addition, the limitation of development on the outlook parcel to 15,000 square feet is less than what they would have previously been able to do under the original approval, which again was the 15,000 square feet of residential square footage plus unlimited agricultural buildings. And also they are willing to say, this is our site plan, this is what specifically we're going to develop on that property. So we're recommending approval of all of the various requests, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thanks, Suzanne. A couple little details. Where does the Owl Creek Trail cross on the existing driveway?
Somebody else may be better able to help me.
And then the second part of that, as you improve that driveway, will that have any further negative impacts on the Owl Creek Trail?
No improvements on this whole initial section of the driveway, actually. The improvements come as you get up into Lot 2 and then the Lot 1 up here when you get into the curving section. So there's nothing changing on the driveway down below.
Okay. I'm assuming that for the ag buildings, they'll be going through the ag committee for review?
At this point, if approval is granted now, when they came in through building permit, they could go through the ag committee at that point. At this point, we don't have the buildings. The footprints are shown, but we don't have full designs of them.
But that would be part of the process. They will eventually go through the ag committee.
Right. That would be reviewed by the ag committee at building permit.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Rachel and Rob, do you have a question?
Yeah, just follow up on that, because the way I read this was they're taking the total square footage down to 15,000 square feet, part of which will be ag buildings, but it's not really divided what's ag and what's not ag. I mean, they're designating one as a barn. Are we saying that barn, therefore, is going to be treated with the ag requirements and can only have a small bathroom? And
we did. In this case, there was discussion about, right, I didn't get into that at all, but the barn in this case, they have asked for it to take principal height as well as the residence, which they can do if they take advantage of our new agricultural building requirements for a barn. So in this case, they've said, for our barn, we'll limit it to the 4,060 square feet that the code allows today as exempt space, but in their case, it's counting towards their 15. We'd like to use the 28-foot height limit, and then we will also abide by all of the standards that you have in the code related to barns. So, right, the things about, they would have a covenant on it, the bathroom limitation, et cetera. The other agricultural type buildings in this case, again, they're really just calling them residential floor area. So, they've got, this is really a garage, but it's, an equipment storage type building. These other buildings technically aren't falling under all of those regulations. Could we say we'd like, all of them to be reviewed by the ag committee at that time? Yes. I guess a question about, would it be appropriate to have the covenant cover some of those other buildings, or is it only applicable to the barn? Right now, we're just saying it's applicable to the barn based on their request.
or accessory structures versus the residential structure?
Well, in this case, we've said really the barn is the only structure that they've asked for and committed to abide by those agricultural building restrictions.
Understand.
Which gets into the covenant, right, they've agreed to that.
Rachel?
Yeah, thank you, George. I guess I have a series of questions, but Suzanne, can you tell me, are there any no-dog restrictions from the previous approvals?
There was a kenneling restriction from the previous approval, and that's carried forward in this. Actually, no, sorry, did I get that right?
It's no dog.
It's no dogs.
No dogs, okay.
Sorry.
Okay, and so that would carry forward.
Yes, no dogs, sorry.
No dogs. Yeah, this is just an incredibly sensitive area from previous work which I had done with the Picken County Wildlife Task Force back in the early 90s, and some of the work to pull the Burnt Mountain Ski Area expansion back up out of this habitat. I guess I'm really curious to see what the other 35-acre lots that were done by state subdivision, how they lay out on the rest of the parcel. Because I'm curious that we would move this driveway now, but then one of those other lots in the future would need to put the driveway in.
That shows the...
Yeah, I'm looking for...
And if we have the Elmo, we can let the public see it as well.
Rachel, this is Glenn Horn for the record. Figure 10. It's not in the tab ones, it's before the tabs, figure 10. So it'll be behind the text, but no, not in the tabs, before the tabs.
Right, okay, before.
What is your figure number on these?
It's in the upper right-hand corner of the figure. It's 11 by
Fold it
70
over
folds out.
pages.
Want to share?
Oh, I still got it.
Would you like it up?
Up here? Yeah. So wait till figure 11.
It's on.
Oh, it's on?
It just takes a while to warm up.
Just a minute or two. Figure 9. Figure 10. Again, I'm just wondering how there's going to be driveway access to these other parcels. And are we doing something today that, seems like peace in our time, but, in the future, the exact same alignments are going to be proposed to access Lot 3, Lot 6, Lot 7, Lot 8, Lot 9.
I mean, at this point, none of those lots, again, have development rights. Nothing has been proposed on any of those 35 acres. Obviously, when one of those comes in, right, it remains to be seen.
And are they held in the same ownership as this lot?
Yes.
So is there an ability to provide access and easement access off the original driveway versus having to look at a new driveway?
For these other lots?
These other lots could be for future development?
I mean, we certainly, at this point, haven't looked at that in terms of, how you could access, what the terrain is like. Again, obviously you see with the approved driveway what the concerns were crossing the meadow, coming up a steep slope, what the impacts were there, the elk production. All of those issues exist, in most of this property.
And the other lots have no building rights, although they're 35-acre state subdivision. They would then be reviewed under the new code.
Correct. They would have to compete in growth management for development rights and go through activity envelope review for envelopes as well as access.
And would they have a underlying right or ability to go to 15,000 square feet with TDR purchases, or would they be limited to 5,750 under the new code?
When you compete in growth management, the zoning here LIR would be different. So I think under LIR, yes, you would be limited to 5,750 if you're competing in growth management. They would have the option, what is it called under the code, Lance?
To combine lots?
If you combine lots into larger sizes, if you do one per 80 acres.
8250.
with similar to what we had done with the Drosty property. Larger lots, you're able to go up to 8250, that is exempt. So I guess there are two options under LIR. Under this existing scenario with 35-acre parcels, compete and growth management limited to 5750.
Okay. You know, I'm just not inclined to want to do something that seems so very piecemeal. And, you know, that we're not damaging elk habitat being listed as one of the benefits of extending rights when far more damaging activities to that elk production area are just waiting in the queue is really concerning to me. And any number of times when we have extended vested rights, whether it's for 2 years or 10 years or whatever, we have looked for significant community benefits. And I think there's really quite an opportunity to produce community benefits through conservation easements on some of this critical production areas. I mean, it may be a finding of this board, trying to think of the right term. I know it's not non-conforming lots, but for takings and TDR type remediations because of the critical habitat. But this really feels very piecemeal to me, and not acknowledging the rest of this development potential, and almost present it in a way to kind of deliberately have us look in the wrong direction. You know, I really would prefer to see kind of a matrix of the pros and cons of what would happen if this were viewed under the old code versus the new code going forward if the vested rights expire this December.
Any other questions for Suzanne? I mean, that's really one of the downfalls of having the owners utilize the 35-acre state allowance versus having to actually go through county PUD, because we lose control over some of that.
There's no clustering whatsoever effect on this, you know, which is one of the best ways to protect larger habitat. And you know, the other lots will be reviewed under the new code, and there is the potential of findings with the critical habitat to not allow development there, but it would be a very large TDR or other remediation of a takings type of hearing. But again, it just feels very piecemeal, and I think that the community and maybe the elk deserve to know what are the greater plans for the parcel. This piece of property has a fairly troubled history of illegal secondary residences having been built, and then a former board feeling that was taken down and, you know, allowed to stay or something like that, given that there was hints of a conservation easement being put on a lot of this habitat, and those were allowed to stay, and there was no conservation easement forthcoming from that previous owner. And I just don't want to ignore the history or ignore the significance of the rest of the parcel.
All right, thank you, Richard. Any other questions at this point for Suzanne?
I actually have one other question, kind of a little bit off topic, but 5,000 square feet does sound a little large for a garage, but you said there's going to be farm equipment in there as well?
Right.
And there's not going to be any opportunity for a guest quarters or guest house apartment within that 5,000 square feet?
They're not requesting that at this point. I think they can speak more to the various buildings. And
thank you.
Steve?
There's a discrepancy between the 1993 approval having to do with the dates when human activity is prohibited, and in the new application it lists from May 15th through the end of June that construction, there could be no outside construction on the house. Is that right, Glenn? I had that date right.
Did you make that a condition, Suzanne?
In the earlier approval, it listed May 1st to July 1st as the date when there could be, number one, no outside construction on the house or the buildings, and also no human activity outside the 5-acre building envelope. Now the date has been shrunk a little bit by about half a month.
That's the date that was recommended by Colorado Parks and Wildlife, and I think that's consistent with our code plans, May 15th to June 30th, for a production area, for the construction limitation.
And I think the dates seem to coincide when the elk calving period is at its
Yeah, that's
peak.
definitely the intent.
The second question had to do with dogs, and that had to do with the ownership of the property. And is it all new ownership now at this point?
It's all new ownership, and right, the condition in the draft resolution is just dogs are prohibited. It doesn't include all of that other extraneous language that was in there previously.
Okay, yeah, it was with the family or their descendants.
Right,
They still
right.
owned it or had an ownership interest, then they
Yeah.
could still have dogs. But-
We've taken that language out.
Okay.
All right, if there's no questions at this point for Suzanne, why don't we turn this over to Glenn for your presentation? Glenn, maybe, I don't know if you have the ability to address some of Rachel's concerns.
I'm going to do that at the end of my presentation, and my name is Glenn Horn, for the record, and I represent the applicant. Suzanne's touched upon quite a few of the things that I would have run through on this site vicinity map. I think I'll try and avoid what she's already discussed, and point out a few other things on here that are of importance. I think everyone understands that this is the parcel where most of the activity is being proposed, which is, we call it the outlet parcel. It's Lot 1, Mandalay North subdivision. And as Suzanne said, that was the fathering parcel for these lands that are below it in the meadows and in the trees. And I'd like to mention up front that the present owner inherited all of these land use approvals and the subdivision that was done, and this ownership has not really done anything in the 10 years that they've owned the property except preserve it, abide by the regulations that were imposed as to the use of the property and avoiding it during critical calving seasons, and the owner's been very respectful of that, and the owners love the property and don't have any intent to develop the property at this time, and they have no long-range plans to develop the property. There are 3 ownerships. This ownership here is the Aspen Sunrise LLC. These Owl Creek Meadows, I think there are 14 of those lots that are on the screen. That ownership is Owl Creek Meadows LLC. This one is Aspen Sunrise LLC, I'm sorry. And then Lot 1, Goober Family Trust lot split, which is the only developed property, is owned by Sunny Ranch LLC. Some of the features on this map that I want to point out that you need to be aware of is this really is a point. This is Outlet Point, and this is a natural park here that's to the south of it. I don't think that was a disturbed area. I think it's just a little park where the vegetation changes. It's similar to other areas on the property where there's just no aspen vegetation. And there is sage and grass there, but it's just not aspen and conifers. The thing you have to understand about this map here is there's a major topographic break right here at the point. And then this area here, and most of these trees are north-facing, primarily vegetated with aspen trees with spotted conifers. And the reason why it's so great for calving is it's north-facing and it's wet. And also there are no people around, there are no dogs around, there's no development around. So this whole area in here is steep and wet. This area up in here is very dry right here, and it's not vegetated with the type of trees that are necessary for calving, that are required for calving. And then you can see, how this red road would be, traversing across the meadow and climbing up to this point where it starts to flatten out. This whole area here is pretty flat. The point here is about 10 or 12 vertical feet above the park, which is really good from the standpoint if development's in the park here rather on the point. It has the big trees for screening, and it's also a little lower. When you consider this property, the outstanding feature of the property as you're traveling on Owl Creek Road are these beautiful meadows, as you all know. And then it has the backdrop of these trees that are rising up to the south. It really is one of the most scenic properties in the county. So with that as some background about the setting, I want to introduce the people that are here that are part of this planning team and involved with the planning for the property. And I think it's significant that the owner has hired a overall property general manager, Ryan Kadian, and he's here. And Ryan's is responsible for maintaining the property, running the ranch, and also seeing that everyone observes and follows the restrictions that are imposed on this property for human use. Because when Goober owned the property back in 1992, they came in with a plan to develop ranch roads all over the property, and they were approved. They went through the 1041 process, and there is a 1041 map that shows all these ranch tracks. And there are strict requirements about the use of those tracks, whether it be on foot or in a Jeep or on horseback. So that's one of the things that Ryan's responsible for, in addition to maintaining the irrigated pasture and seeing that the property is managed properly. Also here in the room is Matt Langhorst, and Matt's a civil engineer with High Country Engineering, and his major responsibility was to run the surveyors that were required to come up with this plan, and also to address this road, the Blue Road. And it's been really quite an extensive but quick planning process for Matt, because we found out when we started to work on the Outlook parcel, we knew right up front that there was no intention and no desire on the part of the owner ever to build the Red Road. That's something that is not in the cards, and the owners would never do it because how it would impact wildlife and really destroy the scenic values of the property. So that's something that was off the table immediately. So Matt's challenge was to work on this road, without doing complete realignment, and figure out how to access the Outlook parcel given the constraints that we had with the topography and also the existing alignment in this road. And the big challenges were in these switchbacks here, and how to work to improve the turning radius in those switchbacks so that you could get a fire truck up there, a loaded fire truck that weighs 40,000 pounds on steep slopes. And Matt did a really good job on that. We'll talk about that further. We also have Jamie Brewster McLeod here, who's the architect who's been working with the owners in developing a plan for the structures in the Outlook Park that are primarily structures related to agricultural operations, and we'll get into that in more detail. Jonathan's here. Jonathan's been studying wildlife on this property for many years, and he's worked closely in conjunction with Kevin Wright and Parks and Wildlife Department to come up with what's important is that it's verified elk production habitat. And also in the room is Rick Knezevich, the attorney for the owners, who probably has the most history with the property, and that he has worked with the current ownership since it was acquired from Goober about 10 years ago. I've been involved for about a year and a half working on this property, but I think Rick has the best history of what's occurred there during this ownership. I tried to piece together for Suzanne and for the board what was the history of how we got here, and that's why this application is so extensive. It's like putting all the different pieces together to try to reconstruct what occurred. So with respect to our requests, Suzanne's covered it. We want activity envelope and site plan review approval for this existing building envelope. And I think it's quite significant that the owners have said that they have no intention of ever developing on the point. They want to be developing in the park, and they have agreed and have submitted really a complete site plan, and we worked very hard to get that site plan done. That's far more than just a building envelope as was required in 1993, where you could do whatever you wanted in that building envelope. So we have what would be required for a site plan review, and we're willing to go ahead and commit to develop the property in compliance with that site plan. Suzanne covered these minor amendments to a development permit. They have to do with the driveway, improving the driveway here. Plus, we have to develop an activity envelope here on Lot 1, Goober Family Trust Lot Split, for this driveway, this green driveway. This is the area shown in red. And then this area that's kind of in turquoise blue is another activity envelope that's required to get from the blue road here to the approved building envelope. And this red road, as I said, it's just got to go, and that it would be a disaster for this property in Pickens County if it was ever developed. Looking at the 1993 entitlement, as I said, it's just a building envelope and entitled a 15,000 square foot residential house that I think very likely would have been developed on the point. Prior to this owner acquiring the property 10 years ago, I visited this property at least twice with real estate agents. One time when the property was under contract for someone who wanted to develop a 15,000 square foot house right on the point. So one of the most significant benefits of this proposal would be walking away from development on that point and the possibility of having a large spec house out there on the point overlooking the valley. The unlimited quantity of agricultural floor area would be eliminated. The red driveway would be eliminated, and there would be important improvements made to the blue driveway, which would enable a fire truck fully loaded to get to this site and also get to the existing development in the event of an emergency. For the first time since I've been working in this county, I got to ride in a fire truck with the fire department. As had Matt and all of us, and Suzanne's son missed out on this, but we went up the road in a loaded fire truck to see what it would be like negotiating those curves. And I can assure you, if you were sitting in the passenger seat going down this road like I was, you would understand the need for these improvements on the curves that we're proposing. So that's a significant benefit. Looking at this elk habitat, Suzanne covered it. Jonathan is here to answer questions, as is everyone else on our team if you have them. But this elk production area is verified, which is the key word. It's based upon things that Jonathan has seen over there since he started studying the property in 1998. And he said he did extensive studies, I believe, in 2005 and 2008. Were those the years?
2005 and 2012.
2005 and 2012. And a few things that are important to note is you see how this area right here is not in the verified elk production area. And it's comparable in vegetation, this area right over here. And Jonathan said, you know, and I mentioned when I started that there is no production here because it's kind of flat and dry and doesn't have the aspen trees that are required for production, similar to over here. The shape of this, you know, I think it reflects Jonathan's Italian heritage. If you look at this part right here, it looks like the boot of Italy. But it really follows where the north-facing slopes are, the trees and the vegetation. And it is worth noting that the blue driveway is far away from the production area. The red driveway cuts through it. And the area that we're proposing in Outlook Park for development is further away from, you know, the major habitat than if you were developing on Outlook Point.
Could I just interrupt you? Sure. While you have that map up, where, in terms of that location, where are these other lots located on that map?
Well, let's see if I can orient you. This, yeah, Rob's got it right there.
That's the Outlook parcel.
Yeah, that's
there.
Outlook parcel.
So the Outlook parcel envelope is down in.
So when you place that on there, I'm just trying to get a picture of where those lots would be then.
Okay, so this lot right there, okay, is the subject lot. So if you go north of that right there, lot 4.
It's to the same scale almost.
Lot 4, George, you see that? Would be right there.
Okay, so some of these lots are within the elk calving area.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, that's all I want
Oh,
to know.
definitely.
All right,
And-
thank you.
And if I can follow up on that question, though, that's not the only elk calving habitat area on the larger parcel. If we were looking at some of the other lots up around 14 and 6 and 8, would they also have production habitat?
Jonathan, you want to respond to that?
14.6.
This area?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much off map of what you have showing.
Farther over towards, you know.
Yeah, once you get past those dry meadows on the west side, once you get towards the Sinclair Divide and the Sinclair property and up towards the government trail, that area, and the buttermilk bowls or sugar bowls, and I know Rachel knows from the Burnt Mountain days, and probably most of you do as well, but there is extensive calving habitat throughout. This is some of the lowest active production area. It might be the lowest active production area in this greater expanse. So the entire area from Buttermilk all the way over to Burnt Mountain, there's active production all the way through that area. But this is the lowest extent of it, and as Glenn said, and just to the west of the Outlook parcel, there's that's up on a bench, and then there's a significant drop of 40 to 50 feet down. And the character of the aspen changes dramatically once you get down there. You have dense understory vegetation, you've got moisture, lots of hiding cover, and when Glenn said that we examined this extensively in terms of calving habitat, I had cameras out there. I walked that entire area many times during calving season, so we have pictures of newborn calves and everything else. I was actually surprised to see that it was still being used quite a bit for calving, but up on top there, it's really not used at all. On this property, once you get to those drier areas, some of those areas, the aspens start to get sort of spindly and with an open canopy where the solar radiation permeates down to the soil, so it's dry. There's no understory vegetation for hiding cover. There's not water sources. So, I have your lease recording for a second. So over here, and this extends out there a ways. There's no production area, and this stuff down here, there's small little patches that look like they'd be suitable, but they're very small. So they're what we say the edge effect extends all the way to the center, so they're probably not used. So in terms of the production habitat extending over to the west, it's quite a ways over until you get to the next stretch, and there's actually a little band of lodgepoles in there. If you can picture as you go up there's a little bit of a ridge, and there's lodgepoles, and then it gets up into the aspen again, closer to the Sinclair property. This is all, all the orange is production. Up here, there's a bunch of production too. I didn't map that.
because I was just doing the area around the outlet parcel. But a bunch of those lots would indeed capture some of that production habitat.
All right, thank you. Just because I don't want to delve too much, we can always get back to Jonathan as Len was going through it, but...
Okay, well, just so you can consider your answer for when we get back to you, I also would like to know about the migration corridor routes that encompass this property as well as the production areas.
So we'll make note of that for the response. One of the things that I'd like to just address right now, because it's come up in terms of these other lots and this map that's on the wall. The current owners have no intent this time to pursue any development on this property. Hopefully in the long term it's going to be preserved. And the reason why we're acting on the outlet parcel now is because the vested property right's about to expire. Probably we should have done this 3 or 4 years ago. However, there was one of the owners died, and it was just not something that the ownership was prepared to do. And now it's significant entitlement, and they're not here to be developers, but it significantly contributes to the value of the land, and it really can't be ignored. And it's something that they've chosen to pursue at this time. And like I said, it probably should have been done some time ago. Now, with respect to this layout here, that was all done in 1994, this state statute subdivision, about a year after the land use approval was granted to the prior owner, to the Gruber family. And these roads up here, those are just easements that were placed onto the map. I've never studied them, given that it was recorded and those easements were created. I am quite confident that they were laid out based upon some plan that the prior owners had for development of the property. And I've never studied them to see how they make sense, from a topographic standpoint or from an elk production standpoint or a migration standpoint, but I'm confident that's why they were done that way. And as far as the capability to ever develop those, they just can't be done without an extensive county review. And I don't even know whether, if someone wanted to develop these lots, whether these lot configuration would change or, whether those roads would be used. We just have never gone there because it's of no interest at all to the current owner to spend the time or money to study a development plan for the rest of the property. So anyway, I just wanted to address some of those concerns that Rachel had raised and address this lot configuration, which really it doesn't have a lot of significance to us other than that it was done prior to this ownership and it's recorded and it's of record. So anyway, getting back to where I was, we kind of went through all of the wildlife considerations, and Jonathan can respond afterwards in more detail. With respect to this road system and the improvements to the driveway, we submitted to Suzanne and to Susan Pearson extensive plans for improvements to these curves here, and they've all been surveyed. They were located in the field. We drove the site with Suzanne and Susan so they could see it, and it's very detailed. It's really not something that we would get into in a discussion in this room, except to say that it's a significant improvement and it can be built given the regulations of the code. And the whole idea was to try to be able to access this site with emergency service vehicles in the wintertime. So I wanted to turn to our plan for this area right here, Outlook Park, and this is a blow-up on it. And there are some things that it's very important for you to understand. Suzanne touched upon it. Here's the tree line. So this is the park right here where we focus development, and this is where it breaks into the aspen trees. As I said before, from the point down to the park, there's about a 10 or 12 foot elevation drop, which is really good for site development, and then it gives us the opportunities to develop in an area that's significantly screened. There's also an elevation change going from this side here, I'll call this the northwest side, the southwest side to the northeast, southwest to northeast. And the topography drops as you go this way. So consequently, the topography and the vegetation were really important considerations in coming up with our proposed plan. This is the flat area where the hay storage would be, the barn, and the corral. So all this is relatively flat and at about the same grade. We would have access through the center here. This would kind of be the barnyard area. And this garage would be at grade on the top with the corral and the barn. So all of this would function well together, as kind of a barnyard. Here we would have a greenhouse, a chicken coop, and a garden, all at this approximately the same grade. There would be an office here for the property general manager, and someone would be in that office so they could see when someone entered into this barnyard area, and they could control access in and out. This driveway goes down in a northeasterly direction to the lower level of this garage so that equipment could be maintained there and stored indoors. Right here on the fringe of the trees, we envision this being the house for the ranch manager, and someone would be living in that house and present on the property throughout the year is our intent. Now, with respect to the floor area and the sizes, we've already alluded to this somewhat. We think that there will be a redistribution of floor area there could be between these different uses, and that's what this note says, that there may be some redistribution, but right now what we think is that the barn is going to be limited to 4,060 square feet and will come out of the agricultural pool. And we did that just because we want to have a barn that's 28 feet tall and not have a 20-foot tall barn. So then the remaining square footage, which would be 15,000 minus this 4,060, would come out of the residential floor area allotment that was granted back in 1993. And these are the sizes that we anticipate now, and like I said, there could be some minor redistribution, but total development would be limited to 15,000 square feet. This access here would be new. This is an improvement to an existing two-track. We feel that there are significant wildlife benefits, visual benefits, and emergency access benefits from this proposal. Plus, we'd be assured that there would be no spec house built on Outlook Point, which I think would forever change the rural character of the Owl Creek Valley, as would the access road, which should really never be built. In summary, we've got a plan that's far superior to a plan that was approved in 1993, which really is not a very good plan at all. And we would request approval of the activity envelope, site plan review, and a development agreement in which we envision this site plan being attached to the development agreement for the property, and also the 2 years of vesting or extension of vesting. Now, before I take your questions, what I'd like to do is ask the different members of the planning team that are here if I've missed something or misspoke that you want to clarify. Okay. With that, we'll conclude the presentation.
Thanks. So, as with any development proposal, The ability to extend a vesting provides some of these benefits which you have stated, and I think they are good benefits. But it also allows that current owner to, if they wish, to go out and market the property. They have an extra 2 years to do that, and we've seen that before. And as you stated, Glenn, that several times that you stated how concerned the owner is in terms of understanding the importance of protecting this elk habitat and wildlife habitat. My concern echoes Rachel's. That's why I asked you to point out where these other lots were. So my question is, if this owner is so concerned about protecting this wildlife area, why not work with our open space and trails to put that land under a conservation easement and forever protect that?
You know, I've had extensive discussions with Rick about this, and he is closer to the owner with respect to this, and the current thinking is the long-range plan for this property is a preservation plan, and a lot has to do with the circumstances of the ownership with respect to their financial situation as to when the timing is right to do that. And Rick can probably elaborate on that, but the current thinking is that the ownership will pursue a preservation plan, but the timing isn't just right at this time.
I've worked with the owner for the last 10 years, ever since they bought it, when they bought it. And I can tell you that you couldn't have a better owner for this very, very important piece of property. Never has even the concept of development of these 530 acres been broached. The only thing that has been broached by these owners is a conservation easement on this property. And and you can see that their conduct during this 10 years has done nothing but reinforce that. We tried to bring in the best people we possibly could to preserve this property and to find out what was there, what should be done, what should be left, what should be changed, and whatever. We brought in Jonathan way early on to do that. We brought in ACES early on to do that. We brought in arborists to tell us about trees. We cleaned out some of the beetle areas. We brought in noxious weed people to tell us about noxious weeds. We've had an ongoing, very, very, very expensive noxious weed program on this property over the last 10 years, and now we've got a fair amount of control over everything that we've got there. Everything that has been done by this owner, absolutely everything, and that's why it's been a pleasure to work with him, has been toward conservation, toward improvement of the property back to its more natural state. And we talk about conservation easements all the time. And as I've told Glenn, and I'll tell you, it really is issues of timing, and when we can use the deductions associated with those conservation easements, when it makes sense financially for this whole thing to be done. But I can assure you that there's been no interest in developing this property, and I bring it up all the time. There's been no interest in selling this property. We get offers on this property, I will tell you, consistently, never listed, never anything, and the numbers are enormous. And they don't even warrant a 20-second discussion with the owner over time. And so the owner is very attached to this property, will, in my opinion, make it her permanent home. And there is nothing piecemeal about this. It's being generated as a result of a need for a ranch headquarters, number one, and number two, the expiration of the vested rights. So really, I mean, if I could assuage some of your concerns, all I could tell you is that there is no interest in developing this property.
That's great to hear, but there's many times that I can recall, just most recently, where there was a applicant that came before us, and we gave an approval which did not meet our code in terms of stream setbacks, and I asked point blank if that person was going to actually continue to work on that house, to live in it for their family, and they said yes. And a few months later, it's now on the market. So we know things change, and I just wonder if there's an ability, even with a financial plan, to look at a long-range agreement with open space and trails to spread out some dollars over a period of time to put forth a conservation easement.
I don't think that there would be any reticence to discuss that, but certainly not in connection with this land use approval. I mean, that's just, you're talking about a process that is time-consuming, long-range, and whatever, and this land use approval is currently before you now. And
Suzanne, if this vesting expires, then what is the process in terms of the applicant having to come back for development?
It would be under the current zoning of LIR, so they'd be limited to 5750, come in for site plan review, basically, with the previously approved envelope. They have a development right, so it's not changing that status at all.
And so site review plan would then also address the past approved driveway versus looking at a better access as well?
Yeah, I guess if this went away, right, we would look again at access.
All right, thank you. Rachel?
Yeah, thank you, George. And thank you for your comments. I appreciate that, and the challenge always at this table is, well, what's really going to happen, or what could happen 5 or 10 years later. Timing is a critical element, and unforeseen circumstances happen. My father died at 57, long before he had finished any sort of estate planning, and my mother died at 68 before she had accomplished any of her estate planning, and the family ended up then selling their assets for the tax bill and things like that. So unforeseen things can force different developments than we'd all like to see. And that would be unfortunate for both the family, who has good intentions, and the elk and the community. I still come back to my question about really understanding the difference between old code versus new code, because if we were looking at the new code, wouldn't the preferred site that our staff would be recommending would be to put it down in this kind of meadow area as opposed to in the elk production area? And that our new code, I don't think, would allow us to grant a new building right on the point, on the lookout point, and it would be pushed back to the most acceptable portion of the lot, which is this. And so I'm concerned about the precedent where, when we've extended vested rights in the past, it's always because there's been a community benefit. And I don't remember that benefit ever really having been, well, we didn't develop it yet, and that was the benefit. And so I'm concerned about that as a precedent, because there's a lot of parcels in the county who people would say, hey, we didn't develop it yet, so I'm just concerned that we're not looking this as the larger mark of the entire parcel, and the migration corridors and the calving habitat, other wildlife concerns that are on the parcel, because it just feels piecemeal. It may not feel piecemeal to you, but it feels a little piecemeal to me, because I'm still looking at a background map that has an awful lot of lots on it, and I would be concerned that we're improving. And again, I want to try to be very respectful here. I appreciate the intents of this the current owner, and their sensitivity in how they've managed the land so far, and I fully give credit for all good intentions. I mean, that's not my question here, but my role is to look beyond and to look at the unanticipated and the what sometimes can occur under unfortunate circumstances. But I would be concerned that we improve a road to fire standards that then is log rolled by a future owner into the development path for Lot 12, Lot 10, Lot 11, Lot 9, Lot 7. And, as we've seen in some other cases recently, private owners, if they're sold a lot that doesn't have access, have a right to sue to condemn for access through the courts through neighboring private property. And so, I don't want to unintentionally create an ability to log roll this set of road improvements. Now it's up to fire standard. Someone can take it to court and push to develop these other lots. And, I would, step away a little from what George had said. I mean, I think that, certainly working with private land trusts like AVLT might have as much or more capacity on this than we would, but certainly we could look to being partners in something like this. So what I'm not seeing in this presentation today is, what are the zones of influence that radiate outside of the activity envelope, kind of separate from the mapped and identified habitat, because there could be a large zone of influence of noise, light, and other disturbance that would take what is suitable habitat and make it unsuitable based on, again, noise, activity, lights, and so on. I realize during construction we have some very specific timeframes, but once you're into year-round occupation, it could be very different. And so, I am just not seeing here, which we've evaluated in the past, how something would be developed under the old code versus the new code, because you're saying it'd be only 5750. I don't know if there's an ability to go up to 15 then with TDRs in that zone district. No. Okay. So that's a good clarification. But for me, it's just very hard to approve this and then not know that I may have left actually paved the way further for use and utilization and development of those lots.
First, I'll make just a comment. I'm struggling a little bit of how to view this land use application for this particular lot, knowing that they own the other lots. But if they didn't own the other lots, how would we treat this? Well, they have no control of the other lots at that point. I mean, this is a specific land use application based on this lot. And yes, we can ask the applicant to use their leverage, having owned the other lots, to create a better good for the community, but viewing this as an individual application. A couple of questions. First one for Suzanne is, they've got this vested right till the end of this year. They could still submit building permits and build 15,000 square feet at the top of this mountain, and there's nothing that we can do to deny them this road that's already been approved as part of their previous approvals. So they can go ahead and build the road if we deny this application for them, right? Or is there a path of denial to say that this road is not suitable no matter what?
I think they're vested for that road and the envelope as approved. So
we can't
until
deny
the end
that.
of December, right? They can build the road, come in for permits to build the road, and come in for permits on.
So theoretically, this road could be built next year.
The only thing that's outstanding is the development agreement that has to be recorded. And again, the development agreement was related to that extension of the 20-year vested right previously. So that has to be approved by the county. That's the one outstanding item that has to happen before they can then come in for permits. But other than that, they could get permits by the 28th of December and move forward with the previously approved plan.
That's the only question I have right now. I mean, I guess that to me is their benefit that they're adding. Now, granted that they own the other lots, they could add a greater benefit by saying we're going to do other stuff to make sure that this road never gets built for these other lots and that we don't disturb it. But those development rights haven't gone through GMQS. They haven't gone through our vetting process. They haven't gone through a wildlife analysis. So that road could be denied for for those others. And I guess that's the next question is, there's no existing rights for any roads other than on the greater parcel, other than, am I incorrect in saying that there are no existing rights for roads on the greater parcel other than this road, which would be extinguished with this approval?
There are existing ranch roads that there was actually a 1041 approval granted for in the past, and they kind of loop around the property, but again, it was very specific to those being for ranch access, not for residential access. So other than that, on the existing road, and there's one point on the existing roads, the lot split, I mean, with the addition of this residence, at that point, we have 5 residences on that, and so it can remain at a driveway standard. Once we go beyond 5, we go into our next type of road standard. So we'd be looking at a wider road, even additional improvements, again, for the existing road, and then, if any road is providing access to multiple lots elsewhere on the property, I mean, that's part of what we'd have to look at.
Okay, that's all I have for now.
Anybody else have any questions or comments? Okay, this is a public hearing. Anybody wishing to comment on this may just identify yourself. Yes?
Yeah, John Wilkinson, president of the Aspen Snowmass Nordic Council, and I'm here to speak to the Owl Creek Trail, which I'm glad you brought up, George. Currently, we like the idea of not having a new road go across the Owl Creek Trail where it was proposed and approved. And we're very happy with the management of the ranch land up there. They have been very cooperative in allowing the trail to exist, and is one of our huge assets for our community because it connects this Snowmass Trail system to the Aspen Trail system. And our concern is that someday we would really like to have a permanent easement for that trail on the property, as it does not exist at this time. We're not asking for that. We just want to keep this in front of the commissioners to know that this is a major connector for our community. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Anybody else wishing to make any public comments? Seeing none, I'm going to close public comments and bring it back to commissioners. Rachel?
George, I would like to request executive session to be able to have some discussion with our attorney.
Okay.
I'll second.
We can make a motion for under CRS.
Section 24-6-4024B for communications concerning specific legal questions with counsel for the board.
Okay, we have a motion, we have a second, any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
You folks will stay here, we'll just go next door.
I'm going to go in the ladies' room first for a minute. Let me get in there.
Exec session.
So moved.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Okay, we'll bring it back to the board.
Thank you. This is a challenging parcel, I'm sure, for the owners as well as for our board. It is a critical parcel for elk habitat, certainly probably a little other wildlife that follow the elk around. We have sat in numerous meetings with the Division of Wildlife and now Colorado Parks and Wildlife, who have discussed with us the declining elk herd in the Upper Valley and the overall health and declining health of that elk herd. They've actually lowered their target herd numbers significantly in our area because of belief the habitat just simply can't support it anymore, and the fragmentation of that habitat. So I guess I'm just reiterating this so that the owners and their representatives here know the full magnitude of the parcel which they hold in their hands. I am going to vote to support this driveway movement. It does offer benefits today to the wildlife, but is clearly the further disposition of this property in the future that will determine whether that remains a viable herd or not. And I would note that the community of Snowmass Village, Aspen, GOCO, Colorado, and Pickens County, and private fundraisers, some perhaps within the Owl Creek Valley, others through AVLT, really scraped as hard as they could to raise the money to secure the Drosty property, which also supports that elk herd and I think is of a tangential benefit to these property owners. We have heard a number of trust elements that these owners hold, whether it's the Nordic Council or, again, the long-term fate of this elk herd. And so I would respectfully ask that those owners take that to heart and acknowledge this approval on our part as acting in good faith towards the good faith that we may see in the future. And with that, I'd make a motion to approve the Aspen Sunrise LLC, Stony Ranch LLC, Owl Creek Meadows LLC Development Agreement Site Plan Review for Driveway, 2-year extension of vested rights, and amendment to the development permit.
I will second that.
Okay, any discussion? Steve?
The applicant has made really significant changes from the application from 1993. This is a much better application than the one from 1993. The fact that they're giving up a road that, when you look at the artist drawings in the packet, it rivals the proposed road on Woody Creek for doing cut banks on steep hills. Also would cut across the meadow on Owl Creek Road and would really be an eyesore and would chop up the Owl Creek Nordic Trail even more and would chop up the elk habitat even more. An anecdotal piece of information about where elk calve. We saw a newborn elk stand up where it was born in the middle of Capitol Creek Road, right on the gravel. He did his first steps right in the middle of the road, right in front of us. So sometimes they calve places that you don't expect them to, but normally they like the places like you described, Jonathan. Another significant improvement is the fact that instead of being able to build a 15,000 square foot house and unlimited agricultural outbuildings, the applicant has agreed to have 15,000 total square feet, which includes the barn and the different outbuildings, a lot of which are actually residential, like the garage, but even though they're separate buildings. So the size of the residential is substantially less than 15,000, and the total square footage is way less than they could have built given the 1993 approval. Also, the fact that this is close to the elk calving ground, or perhaps in the elk calving ground, the fact that this residence is close to the Goober House Lot 1, it keeps the development clustered in a small area and therefore would have less impact on the elk. And the fact that it would be using the same driveway is also good for the elk habitat. The fact that the road would be being widened in some places and at some places as slopes exceeding 30% is minor compared to the alternative of having the new driveway in a new location that would disturb a huge number of acres and visually be way worse. So even though the road doesn't comply now to the fire regulations, the fact that they can make it support for the fire department on the existing location is a whole lot less impact than would be from the new road. Rachel, you talked about having significant contributions to the community in for the extension of the vested rights. And I can see three different ways that there could be significant benefits to the public. One would be like you proposed, if a conservation easement were done on the whole property. And
I never used the word
Well,
whole property, I just...
or
asked the
a
general.
conservation easement on the property, you said. One would be if a permanent easement was granted for the Owl Creek Trail, because that is a huge part of the Aspen Nordic Trail system. Right now, the easement is granted on a one-year basis every year, and it doesn't have to be renewed, but the owners have been very gracious in renewing it every year. A third way I could see would be if development were limited to adjacent to the existing driveway versus not building the new driveway, but only having the old driveway. And if that were the case, that there would just be 3 lots that are accessible directly from the existing driveway. That'd be lot 13, lot 2, and then the lot to the right of lot 5, which we can't, on the screen there, we can't see what number it is, but and that would...
Lot 1. Lot 1. Lot 1.
Lot 1? Okay. And if development were limited, future development were limited to only those lots that are accessible from that existing driveway, that would be a significant reduction in potential further development. And so those would be things I think that the owner and the planners could consider for, future consideration. That any one of those 3 things would be a significant benefit to the public, and I hope they would give very serious consideration to any or all of those.
So I'm a little confused, Steve. You're talking about you're supporting the extension of vesting rights based on the current public benefits, or supporting the extension of those vesting rights based on some of these other criteria that you just stated?
Well,
so you can sort of say, I hope the owner does that, but there's no, there's a carrot, but there's no stick to that, and the owner will do whatever they want to do once they get their vesting rights, and they can turn around tomorrow and put it on the market for all we know.
Well, I put those out as, there are things that we as a board can consider right now as a condition.
Okay, that's what I was curious about.
Whether I toss them out there, and if everybody jumps on one and says, yeah, let's do that right now.
So it may be an amendment to the motion.
It would have to be an amendment to the motion to do that.
Right.
And I thought to travel in to see if any of those, granting the easement on the Owl Creek Trail or limiting future development to those 3 lots would be palatable to the rest of the board.
Yeah, all right. Because where I'm at right now is I can support approving to improve the existing driveway to the Gruber Family Trust lots and to construct a driveway to the outlook parcel from the Gruber Family Trust driveway. And I could support the amendment to BOCC resolution number 930107 to eliminate the approved access road and utilize the existing driveway to the Gruber Family Trust lots to the access to the outlook parcel. But at this point, I can't support a 2-year extension of the vesting rights because I don't see enough of a public benefit. We could discuss some of these other ideas to to try to improve those public benefits. Certainly the Owl Creek Trail, and similar to the agreements that the Nordic Council has with Meadowwood, graciously they have continued to allow the Nordic Council to utilize their property and safe tracts. But it's a year-by-year process, and every year we have to go back and to ask for that. And so to have a permanent easement for a trail for the Owl Creek would certainly, for me, would be one large benefit. So that's where I'm at right now.
Well, George, are you suggesting that a continuation of this matter would be more appropriate than pulling it to a vote one way or the other at this time?
I would support the idea of a continuation and let the team go back to the owners to discuss some of these concerns and issues and see whether we can have a meeting of the minds. The vesting right doesn't expire to December, so we've got time to get back on that. I want to hear, Michael, your thoughts?
I'm satisfied with Rachel's motion.
Okay. Rob?
And I'm satisfied with Rachel's motion based on the extinguish of the rights to build this road. Any of the other parcels that would have to come before us through GMQ West for development rights, they're going to have to go through a full review of this road, and I can't see it getting approved based on wildlife, slope, various other things, and it's just a reality that there, potentially may be a takings. It's hard to determine until you look at an application like that going forward, but I mean, I see that as a significant benefit for the continuation of a 2-year vesting right, plus specifically given the fact that if they submit permits within the next, was it 5.5 months now, or 4.5 months, whatever it is, by the end of the year, really doesn't change all that much for the continued vesting rights, a 2-year continued vesting rights, having this project be put back that amount of time. I'm in favor of the application as it stands. I do think there are things that the applicant could add to amend to try to get a more support of the board, but I think there is significant benefit to the county already.
I mean, I would just add that we may not have that discretion in terms of access to lots, as we've seen. If there's an ability to provide access, we have to allow that, otherwise it will be a takings, and then we have to go down that road. The other thing is that the past owners and the current owner now for 20 years has had the ability to work towards providing a conservation easement to protect the wildlife, as the original application intent was, and it was never done. So they've had 20 years to address that issue, and they've frankly haven't done anything about it. So here's an opportunity to really have a discussion with the team and the owners to do that now. So those are my thoughts. Rachel?
Yeah, I am going to go forward and support the motion I had made. I believe that, given the timelines, moving the driveway or eliminating the bad driveway is significant, and I would not want to force the development of the home site to proceed back up on the Outlook Point, which is where they would need to be applying if we didn't approve the new site plan and the new site movement. And I do believe they would be putting their permits in within time. And again, this is a challenge that you often have to go back and talk to your neighbors and friends and many others afterwards to say, why did you let that happen? And it is not something that we, I believe, have that let or not let ability. But for those who have the ability to work towards these greater community benefits, that being the family and the property owners, I simply can encourage you to participate in doing the right things, and that Pickens County would be a willing partner in trying to find ways to do that.
Okay, we got a motion, we have a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay? Okay, thank you all.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Susan.
Of course now.
Use action item, this is a code amendment for partial accessibility. This is the first reading, and Brian Schaffner is going to present.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Joanna Schaffner. I'm the zoning officer for Pickens County, and I work in the Community Development Department. I'm joined by Mr. Mel Rambo, Mountain Valley resident, architect, and ANSI guru, and he's my guide through all of this. So we're here to present a code amendment that is being proposed at the board's request for an exemption from floor area and growth management limitations for when a portion of a residence meets compliance with ANSI requirements with regard to accessibility and visitability. ANSI is the American National Standard Institute's code for accessible residential development. So I'd like to refresh your memories on the relationship between floor area and growth management. So the way we determine how much floor area is allowed on a property is by looking at the zone district. We have two types of zones. One type has a ratio where when you multiply the lot area by the ratio, you get your allowed floor area. And the other type of zone that we have is what we call our 5750 lots, where you are exempt from growth management up to 5750, and in some cases you can go up to 15,000 with growth management at the board's discretion. A quick example of this is if you have a ratio lot and you have an allowed floor area of 3,500 square feet, that's all you get. You cannot exceed your allowed floor area in ratio zone districts. You can't all of a sudden say, here's a TDR, give me more. You don't get more. If you have a 5750 square foot lot, as I said, you can go up to 15,000 square feet in some cases with TDRs. Not all zone districts are being affected by these regulations. We have the historic districts down in Redstone, like the VC and the VR. We have rural and remote, which has its own floor area limitations, and there's a myriad of other little zone districts, like the business zone districts, where these requirements are not being proposed for. So, does anyone have any questions on that so far? Just very briefly? Okay. So we'll move ahead to ANSI. And the ANSI is designed to make life easier for people that are challenged with access issues. And very simply, ANSI seeks to give you access to your house from your parking area into the house and then around your house, hitting all the vital areas, the kitchen, the bathroom, dining and social areas, bedroom, and then also elevator access between floors where that's applicable. So previously, the board approved some allowances. I'll just give you that. In the middle of the page, the previous approvals are kind of outlined. I know you need one. And you can see that if you're 100% in compliance with ANSI, then you get a 300 square foot allowance for general living areas, 100 square feet per floor for a qualified elevator, 50 50 square feet was approved for accessory structures that are existing as of the date of the ordinance and have at least 250 square feet of habitable space in them. And if you are doing a remodel on a residence and you retain 65% of that residence, we have a 100 square foot allowance for stairs and ramps. And again, that's per floor. And those are all given to the ratio lots because, as I said, you can't bump out your ratio in any way but for these allowances. So these allowances let you exceed the allowed floor area and also lets you exceed 5750. So you're exempt from both floor area and growth management limitations. Today, we're here to propose, I want to say that these allowances that the board has previously approved, I have some good news here. Hold on a second. Let me find myself. These amendments that you previously approved were noticed in the Denver Post. And according to John Peacock, the National Counties Government, which is called NACO, was inspired to adopt similar standards. And Marty Ames also gave us kudos, saying that there was a 2-year study on the needs of seniors in resort communities, and visitability was number 2 right after transportation. So the amendments that you've made have been noted and were very well received. But that's not enough for you guys. You wanted more. You wanted us to come back and you said, if you had a house and you only wanted to do a portion of the house, what can we give you? What kind of allowance can we give you for just modifying a portion of your house? So that's what we're proposing today. You also asked us to look at ways that we may want to consider mandatory compliance in the future for all new residential construction. And we ran both of those things past the P&Z. P&Z was supportive of allowances for when a portion of the house is compliant, but they were not too excited about the options presented and thought that it might be best if we waited for when this ordinance sunsets and that we can look at how it's being used and what, we'll know more about how it's actually playing out, and that maybe we can consider additional regulations at that time. So that being said, Marla's here to help answer any questions, and I can go into it more deeply if you'd like, or we can start now.
Join, when is this set to sunset?
I think it's in 3 years.
3 years. Questions for Joanne? Rachel?
Yeah, just to clarify a few things, because it has been a little while since we looked at this and all these numbers. There are no allowances for the 5750 square foot lots or above. So if someone were to buy a couple TDRs and they're up to 82 or 10,000 square foot house, they're not allowed add-on, and this is for new construction. They're not allowed to add on to their allowed.
For 5750 lots, new construction, they get a 100 square foot elevator allowance.
Okay, but not the other allowances.
Right.
Thank you. I just wanted to confirm. I thought that was how we modified it, as we saw before. And the other is kind of a broader question or comment. I certainly can understand our planning and zoning not wanting to require elevators in new construction. I mean, that would be pushing that limit, certainly. But it seems that perhaps things like the size of the doorways or something would be something we could consider as part of our code, without it being an undue hardship in new construction.
And we'd like to discuss that today to the extent the board's interested, certainly.
Okay. I just wanted to know, because again, my thought has always been, well, I hate to have 3 years of construction and then a lot more retrofitting if without an extreme cost measure, it's possible. So I'll wait till that discussion occurs.
Other questions for Joanne? Steve?
In the proposed allowance, what if a person were able to achieve 100% compliance in a 5750? Would they be allowed, to add an elevator to reach different floors in an existing
In an existing, we're not proposing any allowances for the 5750 lots.
Even if it's whole partial or 100%, you wouldn't allow any additional for that? Okay.
That was at the board's direction.
Okay, while Steve is thinking, Mr. Randall, did you have anything to add to this?
Well, I was just going to comment that one of the things that seemed to be very important in our previous meetings was the idea that people would be able to retrofit existing homes, and it would be efforts on the part of the county to partner with those people to do so. So where we're really not engaged in this much at all is new homes. We didn't really address that much in the previous discussions, and we were left with a couple of homework assignments that have gone the route through P&Z and so forth. But in that process, the partial compliance is simply being added. It's not changing what was previously approved. And there's nothing in this really that does in a major way address new homes, other than the fact that the 100 square foot elevator allowance at the 5750 is there. There's absolutely nothing else in that. So you may, in fact, as Rachel has said, be at a point where you're creating a zone that almost invites people 3 years from now to have problems, or to come back and say, I bought a 2-year-old house. We've done all these things that are not visible changes, certainly for accessibility. And I would emphasize there's 3 levels of ANSI, and none of the highly visible grab bars and appliance type, apparatus type items are included in that. But the blocking in the walls is, all the door widths, all the stair widths and so forth, the virtually no cost, or less than 1% of the cost of a house type things are all included in it, leaving a pretty big gap if somebody buys a house this year, comes back and wants those items, maybe it does warrant discussion. And even Steve's question is a very logical question. How does it apply when you pass the cusp, so to speak, of going to 5,750 square feet? And we did, if I could, say there are a couple of items that were in your packet that define the 3 types of ANSI compliances, and without going into that after you've had a really long afternoon, basic visibility, or this type C compliance, does address having all the doors, stair widths, and if there are ramps, the slopes of those ramps controlled, and having a parking space to get into the house. It's borrowing from that basic visibility, which is the lowest application, quite frankly, of ANSI standards. It's borrowing from that might be a good first phase for new homes, whereas you would be amending it likely over the years to better fit needs as you see more exposure to it. The amendment that you've already approved allows for existing homes and delves quite a bit into what's called basic accessibility, or type B ANSI. That in itself requires more accommodation. That requires that, for example, at vanities and bathrooms, that the bottom portion of the vanity be removable. Most major cabinet manufacturers make that. You buy it right out of the catalog. It requires that the carpet or tile or whatever's in that room go underneath it, and then you slide the cabinet in on top of it. So it further eases the expense of having the accessibility accommodations. There's also type A units, which are specialty built units that you see in rehab centers and so forth. It is actually possible to add all of the appliances, or virtually all of the appliances, to a type B or C unit to eventually get it to type A, but by the time it's type A, it includes an elevator. The way ANSI is set up, there's this whole book of requirements. Very interesting, lots of pictures and lots of tables. It's fairly complicated. But the part that actually applies that you've approved is about a dozen pages of it. It's the very basics, more within a digestible range of your inspectors to work with. And what I tried to do in this little guide that I put together is list some possible thoughts that go along the lines of what Rachel's comment addressed.
Whereas for new homes, and I'm looking now at what I would call a sample initial phase, kind of the idea that we might talk about for a few minutes today and then the board revisit at a future meeting is kind of the idea I had for this. And if your goals were fairly simple, which are expressed here, simply saying that if you were going to try something with new residences and you set 3 goals, first that you'd have basic visitability consideration with little or no new cost or new construction cost. In other words, you'd be going for visitability, but little or no change in cost. You'd have to pick a size home it's applicable to, but somewhere around 3,500 to 4,000 feet would make sense, because smaller homes we would hope would voluntarily comply with that. And restating it somewhat, create a home that is easily made more accessible at a reasonable cost at a future date. What does that really involve? It would involve, for new homes of a size you would select, to provide an accessible route from a parking stall into the house. You know, it seems almost too basic, but to some measurable entrance to the house. It would provide access to kitchen, dining, living, and related toilet areas. Wouldn't require you to build special toilets or anything. It would require you to have a wide enough door or path, and this specifies that that path, by the way, is generally 42 to 48 inches wide. So most homes have that wide of corridors now, although there are some exceptions. I toured a new home that is only a block from mine that has some areas that do not meet this, and it is probably a $5+ million home. But they did put an elevator in. Other requirements would be to have access to at least one sleeping area with an accessible toilet and bath facility. In other words, a wide enough door and a shower or a tub in it that someone handicapped could use in the future. ANSI-compliant doors, halls, and ramps, and a secondary egress to grade. And that is something that I'm very happy that the county put in the amendment you did approve, because when we look at our first responders and having to deal with a handicapped person in a home, if there's not a secondary way to get in, it puts those first responders at a huge risk. Not to understate the person that has accessibility challenges, it's putting, in the case of Pitkin County, a lot of volunteers at risk. So that's just an example of a sample way that I can see as an architect and someone who's worked with the ANSI codes, that you could borrow bits and pieces, and if the contractor knew that he couldn't use 30-inch doors and had to use 36-inch doors and had to use levers on those doors, I think you're going to find that the difference in cost between that door frame and so forth, all of those items for perhaps a 3,500 square foot house all put together might be somewhere between $3,000 and $5,000. Now that's if the potential builder of that house had made no consideration whatsoever and was planning on putting in the narrow doors and that sort of thing. Now, the idea of that as a sample first phase is it would deliver some new construction homes within the next several years, and certainly beyond that, in Pitkin County, where basically you're depending on a good design to recognize that the house can be more accessible without doing anything that's visibly difficult to accomplish or visibly an appliance or a device or whatever that would make that home look any different to the visitor who can finally get into it. I do note that there are numerous new homes under construction right now that you can't get into. So, you know, that would be one of the challenges. I also listed, and won't necessarily go through, but I listed what might be a second phase that you would address in a few years. Neither one of these would require elevators, but the nice thing about maybe moving toward a second phase or even considering this in a first phase is, as an incentive, you could offer new home builders under 5750 the opportunity to put that elevator in and cement it into the new home possibilities. It's already mentioned in what you have approved, but we were asked, and I don't recall which one of you asked this. When we started, Steve wasn't on the board, so might or might not have been. I did sit in on one of the meetings, though, last fall, when you were considering this. Yes, and made a very, very pleasant public commentary, I might add. But at any rate, a level 2 of this might be to
start out with just the doors and the basics, and I'm not, Rachel and I didn't talk about this in advance of the meeting, but to talk about maybe doing that and let that go through the test period, where you're basically saying you don't want people to have to tear out doors and stairs and things, especially stairs are incredibly expensive to change at a later date, or to widen hallways, if in fact that can be part of new construction in medium-sized houses. If we weren't in Pitkin County, maybe 3,500 square feet wouldn't be a medium-sized house, but
George?
that was the presentation.
Yeah, you were kind of coming toward the end of that there, and I would suggest or oppose to the board that I'm 100% in favor of having a work session on this, but the stuff that you're suggesting has nothing to do with this ordinance. It's an additional code amendment that may come before us down the future.
Absolutely.
And just as in the last ordinance, I think at the very end, the board said, we can do better, and that's where we are now. I agree, I think there's some thought process of doing better here, but it's really, and so I would pose to the board to give Phyllis direction to put this on as a work session if the board so desires, but let's get back to the question at hand, which is this existing ordinance that's here.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Joanna mentioned the kudos that have come for what you did with the first phase. And I just wanted to add also that the 2 building permits have been issued, correct?
Morals is going to probably issue tomorrow.
Morals is close to being issued, and if you remember, Barrett Sear was here, who, with his family, who was building a new house in Woody W/J, and that permit has been issued. So 2 people are taking advantage, the 2 that were in front of you. We have not had others. And the reason that we did want to just take a little bit of a step farther, which is what you've referred to, we have in front of you today, is we thought we could do a little better, and we have. But the reason the Planning and Zoning Commission did not recommend anything being mandatory, and staff agrees with that right now, is we haven't vetted this at all with the building industry and the construction people, none. We've talked with the people who had the desire to do it, and with you, and with Merle, and that's really, we haven't had this conversation yet that we would like to have before we move to making anything mandatory.
Thank you, and I agree with that. I agree with both those statements. I think today we just want to address the ordinance. It's good to have this background. I would want to wait till we vet this more with the community, whether we want to have mandatory or not. I'm not ready to go there at this point. So with that, I'd like to just get back to the ordinance for an approval, or if there's any other comments or questions. Rob?
I have a question, and I just want a little better explanation, and actually this was very helpful, which wasn't in our packet, this last handout. A better explanation of what we mean by, partial compliance or portion of existing residence. Because there's square footage granted for one level and then additional square footage granted for another level. Is that am I reading this correctly?
Well, for the elevator allowance.
Well, for
To the second level, but then that second level would have to be compliant. You only get an elevator allowance when you reach a level that is compliant.
When you reach a level that's compliant for the entire house. That's the first one that's already been approved.
Yes.
Was for 100% compliance of new residents. What we're looking at right now is partial compliance of new residents.
Of an
correct?
existing resident.
Of an existing residence. So what is partial compliance?
We don't define that. We don't have a percentage.
So, and I guess that's where, what is the applicant going to do? How do they know if they comply to that partial?
Well, there are like size limitations for rooms that come out of the building code. Basically, you just have to meet your routing has to be in place, your widths and things like that. And as long as you're providing, the access from the parking area, you're providing the bedroom, you're providing the kitchen or limited food prep area and the bathroom area and living and social areas, as long as you're providing that, we don't, outside of the code, we're not saying how big any of those areas have to be.
So let me read what it says here. It says, for exemption, this is the first star under this new handout that he gave me. For exemption, access must be provided to kitchen or limited food preparation area, in addition to providing compliance with the 4 ANSI requirements listed above, which is access to house from parking area, elevator access between floors if applicable, access to dining, toilet, social and living areas, and secondary egress to grade. So to get the 150 square feet general living area exemption and the 100 square foot elevator exemption, if that applies, you have to meet that. To get the additional 50 square feet of living area, you have, and the additional accessory structure with half bath, you have to meet the next step, which is for this exemption, access must be provided to a kitchen or limited food preparation area, a bedroom and bath facility, and the 4 ANSI requirements listed above. So it's only 1 bedroom. So you could have a 4-bedroom house.
But only one needs
to be handicapped. This is what I'm getting at. It's a little unclear in the, at least my first read of the ordinance.
So you were unclear that only one bedroom was needed, or?
Well, there are places in here where it kind of says bathrooms or bathroom, and it's just it was a little unclear, and this is clearer to read than the way the ordinance, because I read the ordinance several times to understand where those thresholds were, because this is not full compliance of the whole house. We're not asking someone to convert the whole house. We're just saying if you're remodeling your house and you have these things, you get this additional square footage.
If they request it.
If they request it.
Yes. And I think the most frequent application, Rob, is something that you talked about in one of our earlier meetings, where you have an area perhaps for a grandparent or someone who's temporarily ill, but you're at the maximum square footage. This would allow you to take 1 floor in most cases, and I would guess that the partial one is probably 70% or 80% of the time is just going to be making a single floor or part of a floor accessible for a short-term need.
So, and I guess the question that I'm getting to now that I got the verification that I understood this properly is, because this is for already existing residents, hypothetically, let's say you've got a 5750 house that's got a bedroom that to make handicap you have to add 10 square feet in the exterior. I would say we should allow that if someone's going to caregive for somebody in there. But again, that's taking it one more step further. But thank you for the verification, or at least me verbalizing it in another way that you were clarifying what the ordinance does.
Rachel, Steve?
Yeah, this is first reading, and I'd like to move it along on first reading. I'm just wondering if for second reading, we might be able to list a couple of examples, a little more of a descriptive paragraph of how it would occur. How similar to what Rob was just saying, because I think folks may have a challenge in thinking, because even the ratio lots, I do think it's a good layout, but we go back and forth between the 1-star, 2-star, 1-star, 2-star, and it just might be helpful to have a couple of examples of what would qualify, what you would have to do, and so on, and that may help with further discussions about 5750s.
I'm sorry, do you want that, like, you want to see floor plans, or?
I think a paragraph.
A paragraph or two, something, maybe working with Lance on it, but just something so that both our intent is clear, we've created a record of how we're hoping to see this apply, maybe we can see flaws that, where there's shortcomings in it, things like that. And then, just as a brief aside, I do fully agree with holding off until we've really worked with the construction community and others. I don't know that we need a work session until perhaps we get a working group together and hear their concerns and their input to it, and then come back to us.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Steve and Michael?
I'm puzzled by how if someone has an existing residence and then all of a sudden they are allowed to add 150 square feet to the general living area or 50 square feet to an accessory structure how are they going to do this? You're moving your wall out 3 feet to gain the additional square feet. Maybe it's the bottom floor of a 2-story house.
That's a great example.
I can't picture how somebody's going to even use this in an existing structure.
Let's say, as an example, in an existing structure, it's a couple stories high and the garage goes in the lower level, so there's a way to get into it. There's probably already a family room or some sort of a general living area. That's why it's termed that way. That's probably there. There's probably an ability to eat in that area. They could certainly put a microwave or an under-counter refrigerator in there or whatever it happened to be. They're not recreating a kitchen. It's, again, an accessibility issue. But they may not have a bathroom and a bedroom on that floor. So if the bathroom and bedroom were the only thing they were short of making that floor work, the 200 square feet, albeit very tight, will actually fit the bathroom and bedroom that they could add on, not touch the rest of the house, never buy an elevator, never buy a different door, never touch a stairway. This would allow them to add that bit on. Or if they already had the bedroom downstairs and they had to bump out the bathroom a little bit and add on a living area, the 200 square feet would still let them do it. So it's kind of like a lump of clay. It's not a very big lump of clay, but it can be molded around. I think back to what you're saying, it can be molded around in narrative form. It's enough space to make it work. It's not a gift. It's basically just enough functional space that you almost have to have part of it to make this happen, because most people wouldn't add a little bit on 2 different floors unless they had a compliant bedroom and bathroom on the lower floor and everything else was on the first floor. They might use only the elevator allowance and never use the rest of the allowance at all, because they could still make that work. So it's really a kind of a frugal square footage approach to saying, if you've got part of what makes this work and you don't want to spend a whole lot of money, you don't want to do the whole house, you're saying as an individual homeowner, you really don't intend to have grandmother or whoever it is be able to visit every room, you just want to have an area to receive visitors. It's a way to take and extend the benefit of accessibility, particularly visibility to them. It's such a small amount of footage that if you had to mend all of these items, no, you wouldn't see people using it.
Okay, Michael?
So on the egress requirement, if your living space is upstairs and that's accessible, do you have to have an egress from that second story also, or is an egress anywhere in the house satisfactory?
It would have to be 2 that, from a fire management perspective, would be considered separate, so they couldn't be adjacent to each other. You couldn't count going through a garage where there's a door right next to the garage that went into the house anyway, because the garage is a hazardous area. Now, in other words, if this were the garage and floor plan, and this were the house, you couldn't have an exit at this corner of the house and then exit through the garage and hope that they were remote. So there are other parts of the code that define what remote exits are. That being said, and totally boring, you normally would have an access to grade on the second level of the house. Most of the houses in Pitkin County allow you to get out a door somewhere or another, or in and out of the house, at least at some other point. And that second means of egress doesn't have to be accessible for the handicapped person or challenged person to get in it. It just has to allow that they could get out in a state of an emergency. They could get out of the house itself. It could have a landing, or it could go to a patio that has 50 steps down from it. If they can get to a place of safety from the house, or if a first responder can get into the house that way if there's a problem elsewhere, that's the only
Okay, so in effect, it's just a second egress, it's not a second accessible egress.
Not to nitpick, it'd be a 36-inch wide door.
Yeah, okay.
But
That's
just to get out to a point of safety. Place of refuge is what the code would call it.
Okay, any other questions?
Would you accept a motion, George? I would move to approve the code amendment, partial accessibility on first reading and set for second reading
On August 14th.
on August 14th.
Second.
Any further discussion? Rachel?
Just really briefly, because I thought Steve asked a good question on these ratios on the partial compliance. You know, it wouldn't be the case all the time, but a lot of times I would see this as being part of a larger remodel. So it's not so much that they're only getting 150 or 50 or 100, it's that when they design their remodel, they have that much more. So it's not just a tack on at the end as much as now we're making this existing space larger and we have more room and edges to work with.
Yeah, it's really giving an incentive
Yeah.
to make any additional remodel comply.
Okay, we have a motion and second. There's no further discussion. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much for your patience.
We'll do some homework and a narrative or two.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, let's see. We're on to open discussion. Phyllis?
I just have a couple items. The issue of the event at the airport during the Pro Challenge race has received some attention from the press, besides it being in today's paper. So the papers have contacted Jim. There was some confusion about how it was presented, I believe, at the RAFTA meeting through, I think, Nancy Leslie's presentation there. This event is an airport event that provides activities to people that may be stuck in the airport during the time that the road's closed. They're also trying to, they'll have TVs there so actually people can watch it. They'll provide music at the airport, which they do when there's often closures at the airport due to weather. So they'll have live music. They're trying to have some giveaways and some activities, as well as inviting people that are at the ABC who maybe want to come over and watch it there. So that's what's going on at the airport. It's not connected with the Pro Challenge event itself. It's just happening at the airport to provide people with something to do. One thing the airlines are doing is making sure all the people that are flying, that have flights that are booked during the time they're maybe closed, are letting people know of what they're going into. The county's also getting a press release out on the information, as well as people need to know if they have a 3 o'clock flight to go out of the airport, that they're going to need to figure out how to get there.
So, Phyllis, what you're saying is that the airport is providing some additional services for people who are either flying in or flying out of the Aspen Airport terminal, just to address if they have to get there early because of the bike race. There'll be some entertainment, some TVs available while they're waiting till their flight leaves. But it doesn't really address at least the way Nancy presented to RAFTA was that perhaps RAFTA would be transporting people who were going to stop at the intercept lot and could not get to Snowmass to bring them to the airport so they also have a place to hang out for a few hours. And so I wonder if the airport staff has an idea in terms of how many people that may be and what impact that will be. Because it's not only for the passengers who are embarking or departing, it's for residents of the valley who may have to have a layover. So there's still some disconnect there.
Right, what I had heard was using the frontage road where the kiosk is, where there's the two sections. RAFTA was looking for a place to stage its buses, because if there is an opening and they're going to be able to move past Owl Creek Road, they actually can stage their buses there and move people. So I'm not sure. They're staging it at the intercept lot for people who can't go to Snowmass, and they're staging at Owl Creek for people who can't get into Aspen. So I know the airport's in communications with RAFTA. I don't know that they have been informed that RAFTA's or that Nancy Leslie is entertaining the Intercept lot, people that are being emptied at the Intercept lot having the option to go to the airport. That's
All right, so
how it's-
again, I think we need to get those players together to discuss this.
They will, and we're not making any announcement of plans for RAFTA, because we at this point, we really don't know what those are. It's only what's going on at the airport for travel, and people who can get to the airport early.
Yeah, but again, my concern is that the airport may not realize that there's another venue that may be happening that will further bring more people into the terminal that would not normally be there.
Right.
That's
I heard that.
Steve?
I've been puzzled why they say that they're going to totally close the road to Snowmass Village for the duration of the race, even to RAFTA. Once the racers come down Brush Creek Road and go up that Medicine Bow direction, there's no reason that RAFTA buses sitting at the Intercept lot can't go up to Snowmass Village. Ones at Snowmass Village can't come down.
Well,
Right then, just release them right now, okay, buses can go.
it may work on the first lap when the groups are together, but as the race continues and as the laps progress, you're going to have much more of a separation. And so you may have 15, 20 minute separation, so you can't start to have a bus go up and then have some riders coming down. It's a safety issue. And so that's why they're saying you may be delayed up to 4 hours. It just depends on how the race goes and how the pack moves. So they're not saying, so they're 2 to 4 hours, but that's why.
So if RAFTA can go through, they will, but if there's a delay in the racers, then they're
No, I
not
think they're just saying no.
going to, or?
Yeah.
They have said that the road is closed for 4 hours.
That's not what was presented to us by the race organizers when they were talking about it.
Well, that's why we had the discussion yesterday.
And my second item is we're trying to get Nancy Leslie to your meeting on August 9th, or 6th.
Aqua put out a thing this morning, and I'm about to forward it to everybody, and it basically has all the event and road closures as, I'm assuming, most current information. And it does say Highway 82 from Aspen to Owl Creek Road closed from 12 to 4 p.m. It does say Snowmass Village Road closed except for emergency vehicles from 12 to 4 p.m. I don't know how someone is going to get to the airport. If they've got a 3 o'clock flight, they're going to have to leave at 11 o'clock, is really what we're saying here to our customers and what's going to happen. Besides the fact, I'm getting emails now from business people saying they're, in effect, shutting down their business for that day. PT, I have no idea how the hospital is going to be part of this. Of course, emergency vehicles, but somebody hurts themselves and they need to go to the emergency room. That's not an emergency vehicle. Do you have to call an ambulance? Any business in Aspen that's open, a law firm or whatever, they're losing out. I mean, I'm getting emails from multiple people about the amount of business that they're going to be foregoing on Monday for basically closing down for a day. I still think there's a way of doing this race, and I don't know, what changes can be made, but one of the strongest things that we expressed was, or at least I expressed, was a traffic flow diagram that showed exactly how people were going to be able to have access up and down 82. So I know we're pushing this off to August 6th, our regular meeting, but I think that's 2 weeks away. I think there needs to be someone, and I'm willing to sit on that committee, someone put forth to talk to the city, the special events coordinator, the parties involved, to really figure out what's going on here.
Rachel?
I agree, and I guess you guys just found out yesterday for the most part, and I found out reading the newspaper this morning all about it, having just gotten back to town. It really begged the question, how long has the city known about the change and not informed us? Because this is really quite upsetting to the traveling public and to businesses and others. And I don't think enough work has been put into some contingency planning, and it sounds like extreme measures are potentially called for, but I would wonder whether the city shouldn't try to lease some of the, electric vehicle type of things that they use for getting people around on the meadows, or that they use for their own parks maintenance, and provide a way using the bike trails to get people in and out of Aspen. Because, to tell someone you have to sit here until 4 o'clock before you can come or check in, I don't know that, people wouldn't have afternoon business meetings planned. I get in at 1, I'll see you at 3, and no, I won't see you at 3, and, things like that. And so I want to make sure the airline notifications are going both ways to both arriving passengers and departing passengers, certainly all the hotels. But, it seems that, maybe we could use our bike paths as a connection. And I'm only suggesting this because it seems like we're, too far in the stew to, do much else. But I think they should work with, and it should be suggested to them, what do you have for alternate vehicles that can take people to or from the airport as needed, using the electric vehicles and the bike paths we have in place, and things like that. I don't know what else to do. And I think additionally they need to plan, if they're going to be seeing people kind of just left at the intercept lot for hours and hours and hours potentially, they need to have some sort of tent structure. It could be just burning hot sun, and they need to have some sort of extra preparations for dumping that porta potty facility, having water on hand, and having some sort of shade and protection from the sun for people who are brought to the Brush Creek intercept lot. Those are just a few things that come to the top of my mind.
Yeah, we discussed some of that yesterday, Rachel, and the Rapid Board expressed those same concerns that it's not acceptable to bring people, leave them off at the intercept lot for hours at a time. And that's where Nancy presented that idea that they're going to have a party at the airport.
If you have to go to work, that's not going to do you much good.
And the other, coming out of Aspen, they're using, so I'm told, is Buttermilk is the other. So the intercept lot coming into town, and Buttermilk would be the place, the drop-off place for people going out of town.
But it says from Aspen to Owl Creek Road. It doesn't say, I don't know how you get to Buttermilk.
Right.
I mean...
And you obviously can't use McLean Flats because that's part of the route.
Yeah, at least what I had heard was on Highway 82 they're going to have a moving blockade.
Rolling stop.
A rolling stop, which they could not do up at Snowmass, but they could do coming in and out of Aspen on Highway 82. So we can clarify that.
So Nancy is out this week, so I couldn't get in contact with her. So hopefully, Rob, if...
It seems like other management of the city should be available, the mayor, the city manager, Parks and Recreation Director, because this should be on our agenda for Tuesday of next week.
We're not meeting.
We don't have a meeting next week.
Cancel?
No,
It's the 5th Tuesday.
Oh, great.
All these questions on solutions give rise to I've lost confidence in the planning of this race. Somebody has to give me confidence back.
So, we're not meeting next week. I would say, Rob, if you're interested in talking to whomever, feel free to do that. And we're going to have a meeting when we reconvene first week in August. August 6th?
August 6th.
August 6th, which is in 2 weeks.
I would just like to go into a meeting, or at least express the meeting to them, that there are problems that need to be solved, not just we're going to deal with it for a day. I don't know how else to say that. I mean, they changed the race course on us.
Is it possible to request that the city make time on their, are they having a meeting on Monday, the 29th? Is it one of their regular work session nights, or is it a fifth week for them as well?
They don't put it on their calendar. I can call the city and find out and see if I can't get a contact person, whether it's in the Parks Department. I can call the city and see.
Yeah, and if it's available, Rob, that would be an opportunity to go to city council and at least during public comments to present that. And then let them know we're going to have it that.
I'll let you know when I find
Then we're going to have a work session on August 6th.
Okay. The only other item, just to let you know, Coal Creek Road had a washout of debris. It's on the Forest Service, but the county maintains that piece for the Forest Service. So they're going to be moving mud road debris that has washed onto the road onto the Forest Service property. It's all Forest Service properties, but it's their plan. So just in case you hear that there's debris and piles on the side of the Coal Creek Road, that's what it was from.
So is it inhibiting anybody from going up and down the road?
It's just making it difficult. It needs to be cleared out to make it the appropriate length. It's not, I think Road and Bridge is up there today.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
But it's going to be a pile of debris, and it's going to be just on the property.
On the Forest
It's
Service?
not on Forest Service property. It just doesn't look good.
Yeah. And we don't know what they're going to do with it eventually?
Right now, it's going to be right there.
It's going to be right there.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, just so you know.
Okay.
That's all.
We should check into how much sediment loading that may mean to the Crystal River and Coal Creek, should there be additional rains on top of that sediment pile. I mean, but that could be just really a horrible source of particulate matter, suspended solids.
So depending on where it is, then it may need to be
Covered or tarped or seeded or something,
Right.
so that it's not just, really damaging the waters.
I can check with Brian.
Thank
They're
you.
doing the work.
Okay. Anything else? Board members, any open discussion? Rachel?
I have one small thing, just because I had just gotten the email. I will not be able to attend the EOTC meeting that's now been set out for August 29th. I have a meeting with QQ as vice chair with the new director of the Colorado Water Conservation Board in Denver that day that's been set. So others can proceed as long as we have a quorum, certainly, but I cannot attend that.
Okay. If there's nothing else with open discussion, we're going to go into exec session, and you have the...
Yeah, can I do something? I'm sorry, George. I did have one other point. I didn't realize we didn't have a Tuesday work session next week. And this is just to put a footnote out there, and maybe we can look at it. But as we've been acquiring these rental properties for our housing program, to the extent that others are not lived in yet, I really would like to see that we have our own energy efficiency tests done, the way we've been encouraging others through CORE, and look at whatever energy efficiencies or water efficiencies we can put in place before folks move in. So it could just be a shower head replacement, it could be some insulation, but I wanted to make sure we were practicing what we preach with the rental units we've been acquiring.
A good idea, thank you. Okay, with that, I'll accept a motion to go into exec session for the purpose of discussion of oil and gas under 24-6-4024B.
So move.
Second?
Any further discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, thank you, Grassroots. We'll take a 2-minute break while Grassroots breaks down.